Hey guys, tonight, we're opening a door that probably hasn't creaked in centuries. You're standing in a room you didn't expect to find. Its walls are lined with dark wood shelves, bowing under the weight of yellowed scrolls, brittle atlases, and maps that never quite made sense. A candle flickers to your left, not because you're imagining it, but because there's genuinely no electricity here. The air smells like dust and ink, and forgotten arguments between scholars. You haven't even unrolled the first map yet, and already something feels off. The floor groans. There's something beneath it. Maybe nothing. Maybe a tunnel, a crypt, or just a whole lot of disappointment. But that's the thing about archaeology. You're either brushing dirt off a priceless artifact, or realizing you've just spent 6 hours excavating a goat burial. There's no in-between. You probably wouldn't survive a minute down there. Between the snakes, the air quality, and the possibility of ancient curses, or at least modern mold, it's not exactly a spa day. Still, you're here, watching, listening, and clearly, you're curious. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You descend into the high-altitude plains of Bolivia, where the wind sounds like it's whispering secrets no one should hear. The sun is too bright, the air too thin, and the ground feels older than time. Here lies Puma Punku, a name that hums with mystery before you even see a single stone. But when you do, oh, the stones. They're enormous, scattered like puzzle pieces a careless god knocked over, and yet each one is cut so precisely you'd think lasers were involved. These aren't your average archaeological leftovers. Some of the stone blocks weigh over 100 tons, and yet somehow they're cut with right angles so precise they'd pass a modern engineer's square test. Some have holes bored clean through them, as though someone took a giant drill to diorite one of the hardest rocks on Earth. Historians still argue whether the Tiwanaku people who supposedly built this place were really the ones who carved it. After all, they didn't have metal tools, the wheel, or even a written language. Mainstream archaeologists believe Puma Punku was built around 500 to 1000 AD as part of the larger Tiwanaku complex, but the site looks like it belongs in another timeline entirely. Maybe even another dimension. The craftsmanship is so advanced that it feels out of place, anachronistic, as if someone reached into the future, borrowed a toolkit from NASA, and left it behind. Take the famous H-blocks. Identical in size and shape, they interlock like a cosmic Lego set. Were they the supports for a roof's structural joints, or were the builders just showing off? No one's quite sure. Even stranger, these blocks are made of andesite and red sandstone materials, not exactly known for being easy to carve. And the nearest quarry for some of these stones, over 50 kilometers away through rough terrain, across rivers, and over mountain passes. You pause to imagine the logistics. No cranes, no forklifts, no wheelbarrows, just human muscle and maybe a llama or two. Theories range from rolling the stones on logs, trees that didn't exist in large quantities at this altitude, to floating them on rafts across non-navigable terrain, to, well, levitation. Yes, seriously. One fringe theory even claims the stones were sung into place using resonant sound waves, as in ancient sound engineering. It's kind of beautiful and kind of insane. Still, the idea that we've simply underestimated the ingenuity of ancient builders might be more unsettling than alien intervention. Because if they could achieve this without advanced technology, what does that say about us? That maybe we're the ones who've lost knowledge, not gained it. And there's more. The stones aren't just functional, they're symmetrical, mathematical, elegant. Some of them appear to be designed with 3D interlocking parts as if they were components of a machine. Not in a crude Flintstones way, but in a way that hints at intention, at planning, at something deeper. And yet, no blueprints, No inscriptions, not even graffiti. Whoever built Puma Punku left behind no instructions, no "Kilroy was here," nothing to hint at why they made it so perfect. It's like walking into an operating room, finding a set of instruments, and having no idea what surgery they're for. Some suggest Puma Punku was a ceremonial site, a place for elite rituals or celestial alignments. Others believe it was once a port for a now-vanished lake. That's right, a dock, which only adds another layer of weird giant stones, perfect cuts, and boats. Inland. And just when you think it can't get stranger, someone inevitably brings up aliens. The idea that extraterrestrials played a role here has been passed around since at least the 1970s, thanks in part to those dramatic documentaries with deep-voiced narrators and questionable hairstyles. And while it's easy to roll your eyes, it's also hard not to feel the chill of wonder when standing among those blocks, knowing you couldn't recreate them with your own two hands, even if someone paid you in solid gold. There's a poetic contrast here, a civilization that couldn't write, couldn't smelt iron, and couldn't draft blueprints, yet may have constructed a site that rivals some modern architectural feats. It's humbling, it's confusing, and it forces you to question what the word advanced even means. As the wind whistles through the empty corridors of Puma Punku, you notice how deliberately unfinished it feels. Some stones are set, some are scattered, others lie as if they were mid-transport and suddenly dropped. Was the site abandoned in haste? Did a catastrophe interrupt construction? Or was it never completed by design, a half-built message left for the future? There's a theory that what we see now is just the skeleton of something far greater. That erosion and time have stripped away the surface, leaving us with architectural bones, the hints of a lost body. Maybe the original builders meant for it to decay into mystery, like a time capsule nobody labeled. And still we wonder why here, why so high, so remote, so difficult. The Andes don't make for easy construction zones. Yet here they are, stones that defy our explanations, whispering secrets across time and thin mountain air. You touch the edge of one smooth cut, run your fingers along its cold geometry. It doesn't feel accidental. It feels intentional. As if someone long ago meant for you to find it, meant for you to ask these questions, meant for you to not sleep quite so easily tonight. But don't worry, we'll drift back into dreamland soon enough. For now, Puma Punku waits. Its stones lie silent, their secrets held tight like a language carved into granite. And maybe that's the point, not to solve it, but to feel it, to sit in the space between answers. Just like that Mercury river we'll visit later. Sometimes it's the shimmer in the unknown that's most mesmerizing. From the wind-swept heights of the Andes, you now drift over sands turned to gold beneath the Egyptian sun. The air thickens ancient and dry as you arrive at the Valley of the Kings. Time folds here, stacked in layers of silence and stone. You've walked into a world that worshipped eternity. And inside a single tomb, one so crammed with treasures it barely shut, rested an object small enough to be missed and strange enough to rewrite everything. It's a dagger. That's it. A short, elegant blade found beside the mummy of a young boy king Tutankhamun. But unlike the gold masks and ceremonial trinkets that shared his grave, this weapon isn't just ornamental, it's extraterrestrial. And no, that's not just a clickbait headline, it's literal. Tutankhamun's dagger is made from meteoritic iron, as in, it came from space. Not poetic stars in your eyes space, but a real burned-up rock from beyond Earth's atmosphere. Historians still argue whether the ancient Egyptians fully understood what they were working with, but one thing's for sure, they valued this material deeply. They even had a name for it, iron from the sky, which sounds romantic until you realize how impractical it was. Meteoritic iron is incredibly rare, brittle, and difficult to forge. It doesn't smelt easily like earthly iron. You can't just toss it in a fire and hammer away. And this was well before the Iron Age centuries, before humans had figured out how to work regular iron, let alone the spaceborne kind. And yet, here it is. A perfectly balanced blade, smooth and untarnished, after more than 3,000 years. This single dagger raises questions about Egypt's technological sophistication. How did they shape it? Who crafted it? Was it a local metallurgist who just happened to be the Michelangelo of his day? Or was it imported a diplomatic gift from the Mitanni, or Hittites? Or maybe the Egyptians weren't quite as primitive as we've assumed. You stand in the golden flicker of torchlight, imagining the boy Pharaoh's small mummified frame, the blade nestled beside him. Was it placed there as a symbol of power? A cosmic talisman? Or was it simply his favorite toy? It's hard to tell. The Egyptians didn't leave a note. They just left the thing itself silent, gleaming impossibly well made. Some fringe theorists have jumped straight to the obvious sci-fi implications. A blade from the stars. Clearly aliens gifted it. Maybe it was part of some intergalactic trade route. Maybe Tutankhamun was a chosen child, a hybrid of stardust and Nile clay. Okay, yes, it's a stretch, but admit it, you're picturing it now, aren't you? More grounded researchers point to ancient texts and rituals. In Egyptian culture, the stars weren't just decorations in the sky. They were homes of the gods. The afterlife was believed to begin there. So giving a celestial weapon to a dead king wasn't just symbolic, it was possibly practical. You're heading to the stars. Better take some star metal with you. And remember, this isn't the only time meteoritic iron was used in ancient Egypt. Other beads, ceremonial items, and even amulets have been found, all suggesting that iron from the sky was both rare and revered. It was the platinum of the ancient world, exotic, hard to work with, and guaranteed to impress at funerals. Still, this blade stands apart. Its balance, its preservation, and the sheer boldness of putting it in the hands of a teenager. Tutankhamun died young, barely 18, and yet someone took the time to place a cosmic dagger next to his remains. It was more than a royal keepsake. It was a message. And here's where it gets really strange. In 2016, scientists traced the probable source of the iron. It matched the composition of a known meteorite that landed near the Red Sea. So not only did the Egyptians collect this iron, they may have tracked down its impact site. Can you picture it? A group of priests or metal workers wandering the desert chasing fire in the sky. Now you're beginning to see how odd this all is. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't luck. It was intention. And intention leaves fingerprints, even if they're 3,000 years old and buried beneath sand. You lean closer in your mind, studying the blade through museum glass. It gleams softly, untouched by rust. There's no corrosion, no decay. Just form and function in eerie harmony. Even the handle, crafted from gold and crystal, is too intricate to be merely symbolic. It was built to last, built with care, built for someone who was supposed to wield it in the next life. Was it ever used in this one? We don't know. The blade shows no signs of wear. Maybe it was forged specifically for the burial. Maybe it was never meant to cut anything but the veil between worlds. And that's the thing, the Egyptians were masters of metaphor, of ritual, of layering meaning, until it became impossible to tell what was real and what was symbolic. But this dagger is real. Undeniably so. It's one of the few items from the ancient world that we can definitively say came from outside Earth. That's not metaphor. That's metallurgy. As you let that settle, you begin to wonder, what else have we overlooked? How many other objects buried deeper or destroyed by time carried similar stories? Was this a one-time event or part of a lost tradition? What if more sky metal artifacts once existed and were melted down, lost in temple fires, or worn by other forgotten kings? These questions don't keep you up, they lull you in. Because archaeology isn't just about what we find. It's about what we almost found, what we might find, what we've already walked past without noticing. So, You ease back, blinking into that timeless Egyptian twilight, the stars beginning to twinkle high above the dunes. Somewhere out there, another meteor might be falling. Maybe someone's watching it, just like they did 3,000 years ago. And maybe one day someone will dig it up again and ask the same question you're asking now. How did they know? You descend again, this time into central Turkey, where rolling hills and gentle farmland hide something far stranger than what lies above. In the town of Derinkuyu, people live ordinary lives: grocery stores, small cafes, backyard gardens. Nothing about the town suggests that underneath it is one of the most mind-bending archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. But in 1963, a man knocked down a basement wall in his home and found a tunnel. That's not a metaphor. He found a literal tunnel. Behind it, a narrow stone passage that led deeper and deeper into the earth. And as he kept walking, more rooms appeared, then more, then staircases, then ventilation shafts. By the time archaeologists arrived, it was clear the man hadn't discovered a cave. He had uncovered a city, a hidden metropolis beneath the modern world. Welcome to the underground city of Derinkuyu, an architectural enigma carved into volcanic rock. This wasn't a few caverns for storage. This was a planned, engineered, multi-level complex, reportedly as many as 18 stories deep. Some of it is still uncharted. The part that is explored could once have sheltered over 20,000 people. And not just people. Livestock, food, water, life. Historians still argue whether Derinkuyu was carved all at once or evolved over centuries. The prevailing theory is that the first parts of the city were built by the Phrygians around the 8th century BCE. Later, it may have been expanded by early Christians fleeing persecution, or by the Byzantines as a defense against Arab invasions. But here's where things get weird. The oldest parts show signs of remarkable planning. Advanced ventilation systems, water wells, dug deeper than the reach of surface contaminants, and rolling stone doors designed to be sealed from the inside. These aren't crude stone slabs shoved into place. These are massive circular boulders that fit precisely into arched doorways, like secret locks in a fantasy novel. Some of them could only be opened from within, perfect for defense. Which raises a different kind of question. What were they hiding from? Because you don't build an entire subterranean city on a whim. Something had to drive people underground. War is the easy answer. Climate change is another. Volcanic winters, solar events, even ancient pandemics. But the scale of Derinkuyu suggests more than just a brief stay. It wasn't a panic bunker. It was a home, a world below the world. The deeper you go, the more sophisticated it gets. Storage rooms for grain, wine presses, schools, chapels, kitchens. And then there's the silence. That kind of layered ancient quiet that doesn't just muffle noise, it humbles you. It's the sound of something intentionally forgotten. And that's what sticks with you. Not just that someone built this place, but that they hid it so well it wasn't found for centuries. Derinkuyu wasn't discovered. It was remembered. You picture the inhabitants, families living by oil lamps, children running barefoot through corridors of volcanic stone, priests praying underground while snow fell on the surface above. It's a strange inversion of the usual archaeological story. Most ancient wonders reach for the sky, pyramids, temples, towers. But this dives deep, choosing darkness over height, concealment over grandeur. Some fringe researchers suggest Derinkuyu wasn't built by any known group at all. They point to legends of the Anunnaki subterranean people or survivors of a prehistoric cataclysm who had no choice but to live beneath the earth. The similarities to other underground cities like Kaymakla, also in Cappadocia, add fuel to the mystery. Were these isolated efforts, or parts of a vast subterranean network? Even the geology plays tricks. The soft volcanic tuff makes excavation easy, but also dangerously prone to collapse. And yet, the The walls of Derinkuyu have endured for millennia, showing no signs of reckless design. That's not beginner's luck. That's knowledge. One theory, less science fiction. More soft science suggests the city was used during times of social collapse. When society above ground fractured, whether from drought war or spiritual upheaval, people retreated to a place that promised order, quiet, and survival. Derinkuyu became a refuge not just from the elements, but from chaos itself. And here's a thought that lingers: we've only explored a fraction of it. Many chambers remain sealed, deemed unstable or too difficult to excavate. Ground-penetrating radar suggests more tunnels beneath the lowest accessible levels. Some believe Derinkuyu may connect to other underground cities, possibly stretching for miles across Cappadocia, like veins in the rock. What's down there? More chapels, burials, artifacts, or something else entirely? Something that made ancient people lock the doors and never come back. You descend a narrow stone stairway just wide enough for one person. The air grows cooler, more mineral-scented. Your footsteps echo differently here, less bounce, more weight. At the bottom of the passage, a small chamber opens. Carved benches line the walls. Someone once sat here. Maybe they waited. Maybe they worshipped. Or maybe they simply listened to the earth, to the silence, to the creaking weight of the world above them. And then there's the light. A shaft cut through rock lets in a single beam of daylight. It's faint, a thread of gold slicing through dust. It falls onto a carved niche, empty, waiting. That's the magic of Derinkuyu. It doesn't tell you what it was for. It just shows you what's left, and lets your imagination do the rest. As you surface from the tunnels blinking in the Turkish sun, you realize that sometimes the most powerful stories aren't written on tablets or painted on walls. They're carved into the absence, into stone that conceals corridors, that twist without end doors, that close and don't open again for centuries. The underground city doesn't shout its mystery. It hums it, soft, low, patient, a lullaby from below. From the shadowed tunnels of Derinkuyu, where silence wraps you like a blanket, you travel east, thousands of miles to the rolling hills outside Xi'an, China. The landscape here seems ordinary. Green farmland, patches of forest, a few sleepy villages. But then you notice the shape. It's not a hill. It's too smooth, too symmetrical. And you begin to suspect that under this blanket of grass and trees lies something much older, much stranger. You've arrived at what some call the Forbidden Pyramid of China, not because it's myth, but because it's real, and no one is allowed to talk about it. Historians still argue whether this is a true pyramid or a burial mound exaggerated by Western imagination. The debate starts with a grainy photo taken by a U.S. pilot during World War II. From his plane, he saw a massive white pyramid rising from the earth. Larger than the Great Pyramid of Giza, he claimed. Clean angles, pale stone, and a flattened top. He snapped a picture, then flew on. That photo would ignite decades of speculation. Was it real? Was it exaggerated? Why had no one mentioned this before? You walk now through the misty foothills of Shanxi province. The soil is rich, fertile. Trees grow thick across the landscape, deliberately planted, some say, to conceal. And all around you are mounds, some small, some enormous, some shaped with eerie geometric precision, and many of them fenced off. No entry, no excavation, no explanation. China is home to hundreds of ancient burial sites, many shaped like pyramids. But they are different from their Egyptian cousins. These are earthen structures built for emperors and nobles. Over time, erosion and vegetation have softened their outlines. Some are recognized and preserved. Others are ignored, unnamed, undocumented. But the White Pyramid, that's different. If it exists as described, it would be the largest pyramid in the world. Taller than Giza, wider, older perhaps, and entirely missing from official records. How do you lose something like that? You peer at satellite images, and there it is again. A suspiciously straight-sided formation nestled in the countryside. Maybe it's a trick of light, maybe it's a geological fluke, or maybe it's the top of a monument no one's ready to talk about. Fringe theorists, of course, have their say. They whisper of ancient builders with forgotten technologies, of a civilization that predates known Chinese history. Some connect the pyramid to legends of the sons of heaven, celestial beings who descended to earth in fiery chariots. They brought wisdom tools and architecture that mimicked the stars. And then they left. Too much. Maybe, but consider this. The most famous pyramid in the region, the tomb of Qin Shi Huang, China's first emperor, is still mostly unexcavated. And that's not because archaeologists are lazy. It's because inside, according to ancient texts, are rivers of mercury. Literally. Liquid mercury said to flow through a model of the empire crafted beneath the earth. And guess what? Modern soil tests revealed elevated mercury levels in exactly the spot those texts described. So, what if the ancients weren't embellishing? What if they were documenting? The Chinese government maintains a policy of respectful non-disturbance for many imperial tombs. This means no digging, no poking around, no trespassing. The official reason is conservation. The unofficial reason might be far more interesting. You can't help but notice how tight-lipped the response is whenever someone asks about these structures. Questions are deflected. Access is denied. It's not hostile, it's just evasive. Like asking your grandmother about the weird door in her basement and getting offered tea instead. What makes this more surreal is how little these pyramids factor into the global conversation. You've heard of Egypt. You've seen documentaries on the Maya. But China's pyramids? Most people don't even know they exist. They're not marketed, not showcased, not even fully mapped. Some are labeled on satellite maps as agricultural land. Others have roads that lead to nowhere, or simply stop. And if you visit, as some independent researchers have tried, you'll be met with fences warnings and occasionally armed guards, which seems excessive if we're just talking about grassy mounds. But maybe that's the point. Maybe these structures aren't meant to impress. Maybe they're meant to be forgotten, buried not by sand, but by silence. As you stand before one of these green-veiled pyramids, your eye catches the slope too perfect to be natural. You reach out, imagining the layers beneath. Earth, brick, chambers, artifacts, stories. Could this be a tomb, a temple, a decoy? One theory suggests the pyramid wasn't just a tomb, but a celestial map, a mirror of constellations, that the entire Shanxi region contains structures aligned with stars, that this, like Teotihuacan or Giza, was part of a global tradition to bring heaven down to earth, one giant triangle at a time. And now, just like in Puma Punku or Derinkuyu, you're left with a feeling that someone once knew something important, and they encoded it not in books or scrolls, but in stone, in silence, and in secrets too large to ignore. You walk away slowly, not because the mystery is solved, but because it never was meant to be. The Forbidden Pyramid of China stands, if it stands at all, not as an answer, but as a question buried beneath centuries of earth trees and quiet refusal. And maybe that's the real story. Not the structure itself, but how hard the world has worked to look away from it. You leave behind the grassy silence of China's hidden hills and head southwest across desert plains so vast and sunburnt they seem untouched by time. Beneath your feet, the Sahara stretches endlessly. Sand and sky merge into a horizonless blur. It's easy to believe that nothing has ever lived here, that this has always been a sea of silence. But dig a little deeper, not into the sand, but into satellite images, and the story changes. Because the Sahara isn't just dunes and dust. It's hiding something. Actually, many somethings. Faint shapes, strange lines, circles where no circles should be. This is where the past doesn't rise in pyramids or temples, it lies flat, buried, waiting. Historians still argue whether the formations spotted from space are natural patterns or something more deliberate. Among the most provocative is a giant spiral in Mauritania known as the Richat structure, nicknamed the Eye of the Sahara. From ground level, it's just a series of rocky hills, but from above, it's massive. Concentric rings stretching more than 25 miles across, like a target drawn into the earth. Mainstream geologists call it a deeply eroded geological dome shaped by natural processes over millions of years. But that hasn't stopped some researchers from wondering, what if it's more than geology? What if this eye once looked upon cities? Because here's the thing. When Plato described Atlantis, he spoke of circular rings of land and water. 3 rings of land, 2 of water. A city both magnificent and mysteriously lost. Could the Eye of the Sahara be that very place, just long dried up and sandblasted into obscurity? Fringe theory. Maybe. But it does get you thinking, especially when other patterns start appearing. Lines, grids, subtle depressions, all visible only from the air. You're not seeing cracks or faults. You're seeing potential roads, foundations, maybe even canals. And the question becomes irresistible. What if an entire civilization once thrived here before the Sahara became a desert? It's not as far-fetched as it sounds. Scientists know that the Sahara wasn't always dry. About 10,000 years ago, it was green, lush even. Rivers flowed, lakes stretched for miles. Giraffes and elephants wandered alongside early humans. Archaeologists call it the African humid period. It lasted thousands of years, slowly fading around 5000 BC. And people lived here. They painted animals on cave walls. They built stone circles and settlements near what used to be water sources. What they left behind suggests complex societies, not just wandering tribes, but organized communities. Then, the climate shifted. The monsoon rains moved south. The lakes dried. The forests died. And the people, they vanished into time. Now, using LiDAR and high-resolution satellite imaging, researchers are finding hints of what's been lost. Buried rivers, so-called paleochannels, snake beneath the sand. Some even lead directly to the Richat. Could these have once fed a central city? Could trade routes, temples, or even ports have existed here, now erased by wind and time? The evidence is tantalizing. Ancient maps from Islamic cartographers and even early Greek scholars hint at unknown cities in the interior of Africa, places that modern explorers never found. There's even talk of river systems that no longer exist, drawn with shocking accuracy. How could they have known? Some say they didn't. Some say those maps are just guesswork. Others believe those rivers were real, and the people who lived near them left traces we're only just starting to uncover. Satellite scans have revealed symmetrical shapes beneath the dunes, large rectangular zones, long straight lines too purposeful to be natural. Are they roads, city walls, or just a desert playing tricks on hopeful eyes? You crouch now, running your hand across the sun-baked crust of sand. You feel nothing, but you know that just feet below there could be a buried wall, a tool, a pot, a clue. In many places, excavation is nearly impossible. The Sahara doesn't just hide things, it swallows them. Sand moves, wind reshapes. What's visible one year might vanish the next. That's part of the mystery. You can't pin it down. You can only chase shadows. Some researchers suggest that the real treasure of the Sahara isn't in gold or lost cities, it's in data. Digital scans, radar maps, the slow process of piecing together a world we didn't know we'd forgotten. A civilization not wiped out by war or plague, but by weather, by nature, by time itself. And it leaves you wondering how many other civilizations have disappeared the same way, not in fire, but in silence, not buried in tombs, but scattered across wind-blown stone. But the Sahara isn't done yet. Because here's the strange part, some areas seem to pulse with energy. Travelers report feeling disoriented, as if the land itself is humming with buried memories. Is it just the heat? The vastness? Or is there something deeper at play, something psychological or even electromagnetic? The Eye of the Sahara, for example, has no known spiritual significance in local culture today. No grand legends, no pilgrimages. It's almost as if people were taught to forget it, as if the land itself wanted to erase a chapter we were never meant to reread. You look out across the desert blinking in the hazy light. There's nothing here. And yet, there's everything. Possibility. Mystery. A buried past stretching farther than the horizon. Maybe the map you're following isn't drawn in ink. Maybe it's carved in topography, waiting for someone with enough patience and enough curiosity to see it differently. And that's the Sahara's greatest trick. It hides its story in plain sight. All you need is the right perspective to start seeing ghosts of roads, outlines of cities, the ripple of something long buried beneath the waves of sand. You rise, brushing dust from your hands, and glance toward the distant horizon. Somewhere beneath your feet, a city sleeps. Or maybe it's dreaming, waiting for wind to shift, for eyes to look down from above, for someone like you to believe there's still more to be found. From the dry silence of the Sahara, where lost cities sleep beneath dunes, you now step into something colder, wetter, and altogether stranger. Northern Europe, with its fog-wrapped moors and marshlands, holds its own kind of secrets. Secrets not buried beneath sand, but submerged in peat. Here the land isn't stone or sun. It's soft. It sinks. It swallows. And sometimes it preserves. You're walking now through the Tollund Marsh in Denmark, where in 1950 two farmers digging for peat stumbled upon a face. Not a skull. Not a skeleton. A face. Eyes closed. Lips peaceful. So perfect that they thought they'd found a recent murder victim. But the man in the bog had been dead for over 2,000 years. Historians still argue whether he was executed, sacrificed, or honored. But that face, still etched with expression, still intact with stubble on the chin, has haunted archaeologists ever since. He is known as the Tollund Man, and he is not alone. Across the bogs of northern Europe, from Denmark to Ireland, from Germany to the Netherlands, other bodies have emerged. Not skeletal remains, but full fleshy people eerily preserved. Fingernails, hair, stomach contents, even eyelashes. The marshlands don't just trap time, they mummify it. But this section isn't about the bodies themselves, it's about what was found near them. Weapons, tools, and something altogether more mysterious, crystal arrowheads. Now think about that for a second. You're in the Iron Age. People around you are using bronze, copper, and iron to make swords and axes. Strong metals, efficient ones. And yet here, buried deep in the cold earth, are arrowheads made of quartz crystal. Why? Crystal is fragile, difficult to shape. If you hit it too hard, it shatters. If you try to flake it like flint, it splinters. It's beautiful, yes, but functionally impractical. So, what were these crystal weapons doing here? One theory suggests they weren't weapons at all, not in the traditional sense. Maybe they were ceremonial, symbolic, meant not to kill, but to communicate. Historians still argue whether these items were meant to reflect status belief or something entirely lost to us. The quartz pieces are often found in burials, sometimes broken, sometimes whole. Some appear to have been arranged deliberately, forming patterns, or placed next to the dead in ways that suggest reverence or ritual. And that's the thing about the bogs. They weren't just graveyards, they were thresholds, portals between the living and the divine. Many believe that bogs were sacred to the ancient peoples of Europe. Liminal spaces, not quite land, not quite water. Places where the veil between worlds was thin. Offerings to the gods were often placed here. Food tools, even people. And in this view, a crystal blade wasn't just a fancy arrow. It was a message. You picture it a ritual ceremony on a misty morning. Figures gathered around a marshy pool. Words spoken in a language no one's heard in millennia. A crystal knife held to the sky, then placed in the bog, vanishing into the dark water, like a secret never to be repeated. And maybe in their world, crystal wasn't fragile. Maybe it was powerful, resonant, a medium between realms. Many ancient cultures from the Mayans to the Chinese believed crystals held energy, that they could store memory, transmit intention. Could it be that the people who placed these artifacts in the bog saw them as more than tools, saw them as vessels? Of course, mainstream archaeology leans conservative. The standard explanation is that these quartz tools were part of funerary rites, objects of symbolic value used to accompany the dead on their journey to the afterlife. They were crafted with care, yes, but not necessarily magic. Still, it's hard not to wonder. Some of the quartz arrowheads are so finely made they rival anything crafted from metal. Flaked with incredible precision, they shimmer faintly in the light. Who made them, and how, and why bother when easier materials were readily available? Fringe theorists suggest the builders of these artifacts had access to knowledge we've since lost, a forgotten craftsmanship, a purpose that wasn't just practical, but spiritual. They ask whether the placement of these tools, especially in conjunction with ritualized burials, points to a system of beliefs where crystal played a central role. Communication with gods. Energy channeling healing. Yes, it's speculative. But then again, so much about the bog bodies is, why were so many of them killed in such specific ways? Strangled, bludgeoned, throats cut. Were they criminals? Sacrifices, volunteers, saints? And then there's the question of time. The crystal artifacts don't belong to one single century. They span generations, different regions, different burial styles. Yet they keep appearing. Subtle, glinting reminders that someone kept choosing this absurdly difficult material again and again. You kneel beside a recreated grave now just for your mind's eye, and imagine placing a blade that's taken days to carve. You lay it gently beside the body. Maybe it was your brother, maybe a chieftain, maybe someone touched by the gods. You don't do this to arm them. You do it because the stone speaks, and the bog listens. Later, as you wander the museum displays where these crystal tools now rest under soft lights, you realize they look more like jewelry than weapons. Their edges are delicate, their points not dulled exactly, but purposeful. Like they were designed for a different kind of precision, a different kind of piercing. Maybe not flesh, maybe the veil. You look closer. The quartz shimmers. Just a little. Just enough to make you wonder if under different circumstances, in a different time, it might still be humming. Still remembering. Still waiting. In the end, the bogs don't give you answers. They give you fragments, soft clues, quiet impressions. A dagger here, a skull there, a whisper made of water and time. And as you step away from the soft earth back into the present, one thought follows you like mist. Maybe crystal breaks, because it's supposed to. Because like memory, it's fragile. And the past, the real past, isn't sharp. It glimmers, briefly, then vanishes beneath the surface again. From the misty bogs of northern Europe, you follow an invisible thread, southward, across oceans of time and culture, until you arrive beneath a massive stone pyramid in the heart of ancient Mexico. The air is still thick with dust and anticipation. You're standing at Teotihuacan, the city of the gods, and you're not alone. Beneath your feet, something extraordinary lies hidden, something the ancients went to great lengths to bury. Tunnels, chambers, rivers. But not rivers of water. No, this river shimmered. It moved like liquid light. You descend now in your imagination through a sealed tunnel discovered beneath the temple of the feathered serpent, one of Teotihuacan's central monuments. The entrance was hidden for centuries, its existence forgotten until 2003, when a sudden sinkhole cracked open a secret. And what researchers found when they crawled through it stunned even the most skeptical archaeologists. Historians still argue whether this tunnel was meant as a symbolic journey to the underworld or something even more ambitious, a recreation of the cosmos itself. But everyone agrees on one detail at its heart: this tunnel contained pools of liquid mercury. Yes, mercury. The metal we now associate with thermometers and toxicity. In ancient times, it was a substance of mystery liquid, yet metallic, reflective like a mirror, but dangerous to touch. No one drinks mercury, no one sculpts with it. And yet the people of Teotihuacan somehow gathered large quantities of it and stored it underground. Why? Mainstream scholars suggest that mercury might have symbolized a mythical river, perhaps the river one must cross to reach the afterlife. Others believe it was used for its reflective properties, perhaps as a kind of celestial mirror, a way to channel moonlight and starlight deep beneath the earth. But then there are the more unusual theories. Some suggest the mercury was part of an energy system, that the ancients knew something about conductivity resonance or even sound-based engineering. There's no hard evidence for this, of course, just tantalizing fragments. Still, it's difficult to imagine any civilization going to the trouble of mining, transporting and sealing mercury beneath a pyramid for symbolism alone. You walk along the now excavated tunnel, ducking through sections that feel like they haven't been disturbed in centuries. The walls glisten coated with mica, another reflective mineral known for its heat resistance and shimmer. Why line a tunnel with materials that both reflect and insulate? It doesn't feel accidental. It feels designed. And then you reach the chamber. At the tunnel's deepest point lies a ceremonial room, oval-shaped with a domed ceiling. Here, archaeologists found thousands of artifacts, obsidian blades, rubber balls, statues, necklaces, and shells. But the most stunning discovery: tiny metallic spheres, perfectly round, coated in pyrite fool's gold. They shimmered under flashlight beams like stars caught in stone. Historians still argue whether these were ritual objects or decorations. Some call them space marbles. Others believe they were offerings. But no one knows exactly why they were placed there or by whom. And that's the enduring mystery of Teotihuacan. We don't know who built it. Yes, we have theories. The Aztecs later claimed it as sacred, but the city was already abandoned when they arrived. They gave it its name, which means the place where gods were born. But the original builders vanished. No writing, no inscriptions. Just geometry, astronomy, and architecture so advanced it seems out of place. From the air, the city's layout reveals patterns. The central avenue aligns with celestial events. Pyramids are placed with uncanny precision, echoing constellations. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent itself is adorned with carvings, serpents with swirling headdresses, mouths open as if speaking across millennia. And deep below all of it, that silent mercury waits. You pause to consider what this would have looked like thousands of years ago. The tunnel lit by torches, flames dancing across mirrored surfaces, priests descending into the earth, carrying offerings, prayers, perhaps even bodies. The mercury glistening beneath them, perfectly still, reflecting not just their faces, but their cosmos, their gods, their fears. Some fringe researchers propose that this tunnel wasn't just symbolic, it was functional. A ritual technology. A place where the living communicated with the dead, where mirrors weren't for vanity, but for vision. Not just light reflected, but memory, soul, intention, wild maybe. But so is the fact that mercury doesn't just appear. It must be mined, refined, transported, safely stored. This wasn't an accident. This was effort, purpose, and yet the purpose remains elusive. You emerge, slowly blinking in the sun outside the pyramid. The modern world blares back into view: traffic, tour guides, gift shops. But something's different now. You've walked through a tunnel that the Earth tried to forget, a place that shimmered with elements and meaning we still don't fully understand. And as always, there are the questions. Why Mercury? Why bury it? What were they hoping to achieve? Perhaps like so many mysteries, the answers are deliberately obscured. Perhaps the builders of Teotihuacan wanted the Mercury to reflect the stars, not to show them clearly, but to blur them. To remind us that some truths are meant to ripple, not resolve. You glance back at the pyramid one last time. It stands quiet, unmoved by centuries of speculation. Whatever flows beneath it, whatever dreams it once mirrored, it still holds its silence. Maybe Mercury was the perfect choice after all. It reflects it, shines it, distorts, and it keeps its secrets. Just like this city, just like its gods. You're still in Teotihuacan, but now your feet move towards something even more hidden. Not up toward the sunlight or beneath the known pyramids, but into a tunnel few people ever even knew existed. This one didn't open up due to natural erosion or war, it was discovered thanks to radar. And it doesn't shimmer with mercury. It glows. You find yourself beneath the same temple of the feathered serpent, but this time deeper, darker, and stranger. In 2009, archaeologist Sergio Gomez and his team, using ground-penetrating radar, detected a secret tunnel stretching over 100 meters beneath the pyramid. When they finally gained access, they didn't just find soil and rocks. They found a cosmos recreated underground, a chamber filled with objects that sparkled, a glittering tunnel untouched for nearly 2,000 years. Historians still argue whether this tunnel was a royal tomb, an initiation route, or a kind of symbolic birth canal through which the soul passed. But one thing is certain, whoever built this wanted it to feel like the beginning of everything. A creation myth made real. A universe under the earth. You walk the passage in your mind, narrow and winding. The walls are lined with pyrite dust, also known as fool's gold. Under torchlight, it doesn't just shimmer, it radiates. Light bounces in all directions. It's almost disorienting. Like stars are moving in every direction, collapsing space and time. The effect wasn't accidental. This was designed to overwhelm the senses, to transport. Then there are the statues. Dozens of them, carefully arranged near the tunnel's end, some sitting cross-legged, some holding ritual objects. They're facing the chamber ahead, as if waiting for something to begin, or something to return. And at the far end of the tunnel, 3 large chambers. These were sealed off, intentionally, as if the builders wanted to protect something or someone. Within them, archaeologists found thousands of offerings, jade, obsidian seashells, rubber balls, incense burners, tiny sculptures. And again, those strange spheres made of clay, coated in pyrite hollow, perfect. What were they for? Some believe they represented stars or planets. Others suggest they were ritual tools. No one really knows. But when they were first uncovered and caught the light of modern flashlights, even seasoned researchers gasped. One archaeologist described the experience as standing in the middle of the night sky. Fringe theorists, unsurprisingly, were quick to latch onto the idea of a star map, that this tunnel wasn't just about the underworld, but the overworld, that it was a scale model of the galaxy, complete with glittering stars, symbolic planets, and a cosmic throne room. But maybe you don't need aliens to make this amazing. Maybe the truth is even stranger, that humans 2,000 years ago, without metal tools or telescopes, imagined the universe not in equations, but in tunnels. That they walked the stars by carving them into stone. That they prayed not to what they could see, but to what they could feel in the dark. And what they built, they buried. On purpose. This wasn't meant to be seen casually. It wasn't a tourist attraction. It was sacred space, sealed with respect and intention. Perhaps only a handful of people ever walked its length. And now, thousands of years later, you're tracing their path like a ghost in reverse. As you pass through the tunnel in your mind, you notice something odd. The layout, the length, the proportions. They're familiar, not just as architecture, but as anatomy. Some researchers suggest the tunnel may represent a womb, that walking it was a rebirth, emerging not just into a tomb, but into eternity. It's a bold interpretation, yes, but not without precedent. Mesoamerican myths are full of caves, underworlds, and journeys that begin in darkness. The earth isn't just ground to walk on, it's a being, a presence, something you return to and are born from again. And there at the end of the tunnel, past all the glittering spheres, all the statues and all the forgotten offerings, you come to the heart of it. The void. There was no king, no mummy, no throne, just space. Some say something was taken, looted, hidden, lost. Others believe it was never meant to hold a body. That the emptiness is the meaning. A deliberate cosmic nothingness. A reminder that creation always begins with absence. You stand in that chamber now surrounded by the remnants of belief. It's so quiet you can hear the sound of your own thoughts echoing off walls built by hands you'll never know. Hands that crushed pyrite, placed statues, arranged spheres, and walked away, sealing their story behind stone. Historians still argue whether the tunnel was a grave or a metaphor, but for you it feels like something else entirely. A message. Or maybe a mirror. Because when you step back from the chamber, what you see isn't a tomb. It's a reflection. Of us. Of how far we're willing to go to make sense of the cosmos. Of how deeply we crave meaning so much that we'll bury it just to believe it was real. You rise slowly, brushing the dust from your thoughts. Above you, the pyramid looms silent and proud. It has stood here for centuries, watching over a tunnel no one remembered until recently. And yet the glitter still clings to its foundations. The stars still flicker in the dark. Maybe that's all we are in the end spheres of light in tunnels of stone, moving quietly, reflecting each other, waiting to be found. You're still beneath Teotihuacan, still brushing the last specks of glittering pyrite dust from your thoughts. But now the ground itself begins to shift, not physically, but tonally. It becomes quieter, more focused. The noise of the glittering tunnel fades behind you as you pass into something even stranger, an ancient chamber designed not to impress the eyes, but to shake the bones. Welcome to the Hypogeum of Hal Saflieni. You're no longer in the Americas. You've been pulled across the Atlantic and deposited gently on the island of Malta in a chamber carved over 5,000 years ago, before Stonehenge, before the pyramids. The Hal Saflieni Hypogeum is a subterranean structure, a labyrinth of interconnected chambers and corridors hewn directly from limestone. No metal tools, no written instructions, just stone silence and the hum of something ancient. Historians still argue whether this space was meant as a burial site, a temple, or something else entirely. The structure holds the remains of over 7,000 individuals, but it doesn't feel like a grave. It feels like a place designed for transformation. The deeper you go, the more carefully carved everything becomes. You begin to notice niches cut into the walls, altars positioned with intention, doorways shaped like keyholes, and spirals. Those same repeating spirals that turn up in ancient cultures everywhere. There's geometry here, symmetry, but also acoustics. Because here in this place, older than most of recorded history, lies something no one expected, a chamber that sings back. It's called the Oracle Room. Roughly circular, modestly sized, unadorned at first glance. But when a male voice speaks at a certain frequency between 90 and 120 Hz, the walls vibrate. The whole room begins to hum. And not just quietly. It resonates. Deeply. Audibly. Through your chest. Through your mind. A low droning vibration that seems to bypass the ears entirely and go straight into your bones. Experiments have shown that the resonance is not just felt, but shared. Anyone in the chamber begins to vibrate in sync, and some researchers have even speculated that prolonged exposure to this frequency may alter brain states inducing trance-like calm, even hallucinations. Whether or not that's true standing in that room, it's hard not to feel like you've stepped into a technology more spiritual than mechanical. Historians still argue whether this was intentional. But let's be honest, have you ever accidentally carved a perfectly tuned subwoofer out of limestone? That's a very precise accident. The idea that the Oracle Room's acoustics were deliberately engineered is gaining traction. The builders may have understood intuitively or otherwise that sound can move the spirit, not in the metaphorical sense, but physically, literally. Through resonance, through frequency, through vibration. You stand in the chamber now imagining a priest or shaman chanting low and slow. The walls hum back, doubling the sound. Others in the chamber feel it too, the shared heartbeat of the stone. This isn't just ritual. This is experience. And it's not the only strange aspect of the Hypogeum. Some of the carvings here mimic architectural features found above ground: columns, lintels, ceilings carved to look like wood beams. It's like a mirror of the surface world reflected underground. A second reality. Or perhaps the truer one. Artifacts found here include shell beads, carved figures, and small statues of sleeping women, many of them in poses of rest or meditation. One of the most famous is known simply as the Sleeping Lady. She lies curled on her side hand, tucked beneath her cheek, as if she's not dead, but dreaming. Maybe that's what this place was built for. Not death, not worship, but dreaming. One theory posits that the Hypogeum was a sensory deprivation chamber. That initiates would descend here not to die, but to see, to experience altered states of consciousness. The darkness, the resonance, the smell of damp stone, it would have all contributed to a trance state, a ritual journey, a spiritual rebirth. But again, the acoustics are the center of the mystery. They're not just present in the Oracle Room, they repeat throughout the structure. Careful measurements show that specific chambers amplify sound in highly directional ways, almost like ancient sound systems. This isn't something you stumble into. This is something you tune. And here's the really strange part. When modern acoustic engineers ran sound tests in the Hypogeum, they found that the frequencies which produced the strongest resonance matched frequencies used in ancient Sumerian, Egyptian, and Vedic chanting. Coincidence? Or did ancient civilizations share not just trade goods, but tonal maps? Fringe theorists take it further. They claim the Hypogeum was part of a global grid of resonant structures designed to tune the human brain like an instrument. They point to other ancient sites with ringing stones, vibrating chambers, or unexplained echo phenomena. The idea is that the ancients weren't just building places, they were building experiences. Technologies of the spirit. Too wild, maybe. But when you stand in that Oracle Room, your voice doubled by the stone itself, something primal wakes up. You don't just hear the sound, you feel it. You become it. And maybe that's the real mystery of the Hypogeum. Not its age, not its artifacts, but its silence. A silence so perfect that it hums when touched. You ascend slowly now back toward the surface. The temperature rises, the air dries, the vibration fades. But something in you still rings just faintly, like the echo of a song you can't quite place. The Hypogeum doesn't give answers. It asks a question in the form of a note that shakes your ribs and lingers in your dreams. You emerge from the depths of the Hypogeum, still vibrating faintly with its strange frequency, but now the air is warmer, heavier, damp with ancient rain. The jungle hums with life, chattering monkeys, shrieking parrots, the low throb of insects always working. And somewhere beneath the thick moss and tangled roots, something older stirs. You're standing atop a hill in West Java, Indonesia. But this is no ordinary hill. It doesn't roll gently or sprawl lazily. It rises sharply like a wound in the earth. And according to some, this hill might be the oldest pyramid on the planet. This is Gunung Padang Mountain of Light in the local language, and at first glance, it just looks like a pile of rocks. A cluster of columnar basalt stones sticking up at odd angles, some stacked like lazy chairs, others arranged into loose terraces. Local villagers have known about it for centuries. It's a sacred site, they say, a place of power, a place you don't go without a reason. Historians still argue whether it's a natural formation, a megalithic site, or something far stranger. Official archaeology dates the surface ruins to around 500 BC. But deeper scans, seismic imaging, and core drilling have hinted at something much older, possibly tens of thousands of years older. And that's where the story fractures. Because if even part of that claim is true, it would rewrite human history. You climb now slowly, the stone steps uneven beneath your feet. The air smells like wet stone and ancient moss. On the terraces, basalt blocks are arranged in rectangular patterns. Some form platforms, others frame what might once have been rooms. But what draws you isn't just what's on the surface, it's what might lie below. In the early 2010s, a group of researchers led by geologist Dr. Danny Hillman Natawidjaja began conducting ground-penetrating radar scans of Gunung Padang. What they found surprised everyone. Beneath the surface, ruins layer after layer of constructed material seem to stretch deep into the earth-organized voids, buried chambers, and carefully shaped stones. According to their preliminary dating, some of these layers could be as old as 20,000 years. Let that sink in for a moment. 20,000 years. That's older than the pyramids, older than Stonehenge, older than agriculture as we understand it. It would place Gunung Padang squarely in the Ice Age, at a time when humanity was supposedly nomadic, disorganized, and barely beginning to string together oral myths. Fringe theorists jumped at the opportunity. Some claimed the site was built by a lost civilization, perhaps even the mythical Lemuria or Mu. Others tied it to flood myths, suggesting that Gunung Padang was a remnant of a pre-cataclysmic age, a survivor of a global disaster that reset civilization as we know it. Mainstream archaeologists predictably pushed back. The site remains controversial, with fierce academic debates over methodology, dating, accuracy, and interpretation. But one thing is undeniable: Gunung Padang refuses to fit neatly into any established box. You crouch beside one of the basalt columns, touching the cool, geometric face of the stone. It doesn't feel accidental. These columns are natural in formation. Yes, volcanic in origin, but someone moved them, stacked them, placed them with intention. And intention leaves fingerprints. Some believe the site was once a kind of spiritual observatory. Others suggest it was a power center built atop a volcanic energy source. Local legends speak of a hidden chamber buried deep within, guarded by a king who never died. The kind of legend you'd usually dismiss until seismic imaging starts lining up with the story. Historians still argue whether Gunung Padang is a temple, a tomb, or a time capsule. But the site continues to resist easy explanations. Every layer dug reveals another question. Every stone placed suggests a mind at work, one we don't yet understand. And then there's the quiet. Gunung Padang doesn't announce itself like Giza or Machu Picchu. It's humble, overgrown, half-forgotten. But that's what makes it powerful. It doesn't scream mystery. It whispers it. It waits patiently, letting the jungle do its work, until someone with the right eyes walks past and sees not a hill, but a monument. You walk now along the southern slope, where newer terraces have collapsed into wild vines. Small offerings, flowers, incense, cracked bowls have been left by locals. The energy here isn't touristy, it's reverent. People still believe this place is sacred, that it holds something, maybe a memory, maybe a warning. And here's the part that clings to you, the idea that we've been here before. What if civilization isn't a straight line, but a cycle? What if Gunung Padang is a remnant of a previous climb, one we lost to floodfire or forgetfulness? What if the hill isn't a beginning at all, but an echo, You pause at the summit, looking out over the mist-drenched valley. The wind shifts. The jungle breathes. You can almost hear voices, not loud, not clear, but distant. Faint. Like chants through thick leaves. Maybe they're echoes. Maybe they're just your imagination stirred by basalt and time. But either way, you're listening. Gunung Padang may never give us a headline-worthy answer. It may never yield golden tombs or forgotten languages. But its stones are enough. They speak in their own way, in shape, in pattern, in quiet defiance of the timeline we thought was settled. And that's the gift of a mystery like this one. It doesn't need to be solved to matter. Sometimes the value is in the not knowing, in the pause it creates, the humility it demands. As you descend the slope, your hand brushing lichen-covered stones, you realize you're not just walking down a hill. You're walking through a riddle. One carved in volcanic rock. One that may be older than history. And as with all the best riddles, it doesn't offer answers. It invites you to ask better questions. You leave behind the volcanic slopes of Gunung Padang, still turning its silence over in your mind, like a smooth, ancient stone. Now the air dries. The jungle falls away. Red rock rises in its place. You're in Jordan now, in the desert valley of Wadi Musa, and ahead of you, half carved into sheer cliff face, half emerging from myth, stands one of the most haunting facades in the ancient world. You've arrived at Petra. And though you've seen photos, glowing columns bathed in rose-gold light, they don't quite prepare you. The real thing towers above you. Massive, ornate, impossibly clean-lined, for a structure more than 2,000 years old. It's called Al-Khazne, or the Treasury, though historians still argue whether it was ever used to store anything of value at all. You walk slowly through the narrow winding canyon that serves as Petra's natural hallway. The cliffs rise high on either side, pressing you into their silence. And then, just at the final bend, the facade reveals itself, carved directly into sandstone columns, flanking a central doorway, all crowned by a broken urn that legend says once held treasure. But here's the thing, the building isn't built. It's sculpted. From top to bottom, it's one single rock face carved from the outside in. No scaffolding, no margin for error. Historians still argue how the Nabateans did it, how they managed such perfect symmetry, without modern tools, without rebar or mortar, without even blueprints that have survived. The precision is staggering. The design a blend of Hellenistic grandeur and native flair. Corinthian columns, Greek-style pediments, but also Nabatean motifs, eagles, urns, celestial symbols. It's fusion architecture in the middle of the desert. You step closer, ducking into the shadow of the central doorway. Inside, it's bare. A few simple chambers cut into the stone. No treasure, no thrones, just space. And that, in a way, is what makes it feel so mysterious. The outside screams divinity, wealth, and power. The inside whispers humility, absence, and possibly reverence. Some believe the treasury was a tomb. Others say it was a temple. There are even whispers of it being an oracle chamber where divine visions were received, or a repository for scrolls and secret knowledge long since removed or lost. And then there's the more symbolic interpretation that it was meant to be seen, not used. A statement carved in stone. A monument to permanence in a land shaped by impermanence. But let's not forget the legend. Local Bedouin once believed the urn atop the treasury held hidden riches left there by ancient pharaohs fleeing Moses. This is where the building gets its modern name. The Treasury. At some point in the not-so-distant past, someone even shot at the urn trying to break it open. The bullet marks are still visible. You reach out and run your fingers along the wall. The sandstone is surprisingly soft. Time has worn away its sharpest lines, but the craftsmanship still hums beneath the surface. You begin to wonder how many other facades once lined this city, because the treasury is just the most famous. Petra is full of carved structures, temples, tombs, amphitheaters, homes, staircases leading to nowhere. A whole city chiseled into cliffs. And here's where things get stranger. Petra had advanced water systems, cisterns, dams, underground pipes, in the middle of the desert. The Nabateans were masters of hydraulics, channeling rainwater through the canyons to sustain tens of thousands of people. This wasn't just an outpost. It was a thriving hub of trade culture and spirituality. But they didn't leave much writing. No grand texts, no stone inscriptions telling us what these places were for or what they meant. Petra, like many ancient sites, gives you the skeleton, but not the soul. Some fringe theorists speculate that Petra wasn't Nabatean at all, or at least not originally. They suggest the city may have been built atop even older ruins, with the Nabateans restoring or expanding what was already there. The theory hinges on some of the stonework portions that seem more eroded than others, more monumental in scale, more aligned to solar or celestial events. Were these borrowed spaces echoes of a deeper past? Historians still argue, and while most dismiss such claims as overreach, even they admit there's a mystery in the mix, because Petra isn't just a city, it's a disappearance. By the 2nd century AD, the city began to decline. Trade routes shifted, earthquakes damaged infrastructure, and eventually Petra faded into obscurity, swallowed by sand and memory. It wasn't rediscovered by the Western world until 1812, when Swiss explorer Johann Ludwig Burckhardt disguised himself as a Muslim traveler and was led to the site by local guides. You imagine that first glimpse emerging from the Sikh, the rock still warm from the afternoon sun, the facade glowing as if alive. No guards, no signs, just you and the stone. And here's the thing you don't expect despite its fame. Petra still holds secrets. Dozens of structures remain unexplored. Chambers sealed by debris. Stairways leading to nowhere. Tunnels that haven't seen light in centuries. The Treasury in particular might not be the end of the mystery, but the beginning. Beneath it, there are rumors of deeper chambers, subterranean rooms, a hidden complex. So far, no excavations have confirmed this, but the possibility lingers. Petra, after all, has surprised us before. You step back from the facade now framed by the narrow canyon walls. Tourists chatter nearby. Cameras click. But for a moment, you block out the noise. You imagine Petra as it once was, a glowing city of stone carved by hands, guided by purpose, faith, or something even harder to define. Maybe they weren't building monuments. Maybe they were building prayers. As the sun begins to dip, casting long shadows across the canyon floor, the Treasury changes color. Rose turns to amber. Amber to gold. And for a few seconds, it looks less like a building and more like a mirage. Something half-dreamed, half-remembered. That's Petra, a place too solid to be real and too impossible not to be. From the rose-tinted rock of Petra, you now lift into the sky, not metaphorically, but literally. You're aboard a small humming aircraft gliding over a dense, endless canopy. Below you is green. Not just one shade, but a riot of greens, deep emerald, soft jade, sharp chartreuse. This is the jungle of Central America, specifically the Guatemalan lowlands. And beneath this vast ocean of trees lie cities, entire cities, that no one knew existed, until recently. This is where lasers come in. Or more precisely, LiDAR, light detection and ranging. It's a remote sensing method that sends out thousands of pulses of laser light per second. Those pulses bounce off surfaces and return to the scanner, painting a 3D picture of what lies beneath the trees, even if you can't see it with your eyes. In 2018, a massive LiDAR survey swept across more than 2,100 square kilometers of Guatemalan jungle. When the data was analyzed, archaeologists were stunned. They weren't just looking at a few forgotten temples. They were looking at an entire civilization far more extensive than anyone had imagined. You zoom in now, mentally walking the digital map. The LiDAR scans revealed more than 60,000 previously unknown structures: homes, palaces, elevated highways, canals, irrigation systems, even defensive walls. The layout suggests not scattered city-states, but a dense network of interconnected urban centers unified in ways that rewrite our understanding of the ancient Maya. Historians still argue whether this points to a single empire or a constellation of allied kingdoms, but one thing is certain: the Maya were not just ceremonial builders. They were city planners, engineers. They shaped the land with purpose. You float now over one of these cities, El Mirador. Long hidden, it was already known to archaeologists, but LiDAR revealed its full scale. Massive causeways, some as wide as modern highways, stretch for miles, connecting it to other sites. These weren't dirt trails. They were engineered paths built for traffic trade, possibly even military movement. And here's the kicker: this wasn't late in Maya history. These cities date to the pre-classic period between 1000 BCE and 250 CE. In other words, while Europe was still figuring out iron and alphabet soup, the Maya were building cosmopolitan centers complete with infrastructure and hierarchy. You pause now in your flight of thought, descending into one of these newly revealed cities. There's no road here, no path cleared. The jungle is still winning. But you can see the outlines, the pyramidal shapes covered in vines, the stone terraces swallowed by roots, the plazas where thousands may have once gathered. And as always, the question surfaces: how did we miss this? The answer is humbling. The jungle hides what it chooses to hide. From the ground, most of these structures look like hills, lush green, ordinary. Unless you're actively measuring slope gradients and soil density, you'd walk right past them. For centuries, the rainforest has guarded its secrets better than any tomb. But LiDAR changed everything. It turned the forest transparent. Suddenly, the Maya narrative expanded. It wasn't just Tikal, Palenque, and Copan. It was hundreds of sites, connected, coordinated, sophisticated. It was a civilization operating at a scale we hadn't dared imagine. Some archaeologists now compare the density of the ancient Maya lowlands to that of ancient Greece or even parts of medieval Europe. And yet, for the most part, it lies untouched, preserved by its own invisibility. You move now to another structure revealed by LiDAR, a previously unknown pyramid. It's massive, larger in footprint than even the pyramids at Giza. But unlike Egypt's stone monuments, this one was built with earth and rubble faced with stone, then lost to vegetation, until the lasers found it again. Fringe theorists, of course, jumped on the findings. Some claimed the pyramids were part of an ancient energy grid. Others insisted the Maya were in contact with distant cultures, citing similarities in construction techniques and orientation. Alignments with celestial events only added to the intrigue. Many Maya pyramids are precisely aligned with solstices, equinoxes, and planetary movements. Historians still argue whether these alignments were symbolic, calendrical, or something else. But one thing is undeniable: the Maya were obsessed with time. Their calendars were complex, multi-layered, and eerily accurate. They tracked celestial cycles with a precision rivaling modern astronomy. So you ask yourself, did the cities reflect the skies? Were they not just homes and marketplaces, but mirrors of the cosmos? You stand now in a digital reconstruction, a plaza brought to life through LiDAR data and imagination. Vendors shout in a language long faded. Priests walk in measured steps. Children dart between colonnades. Smoke rises from communal fires. Above it all, the temple gleams white stone catching the morning sun. And then it's gone. Because all of it vanished. We still don't know exactly why. Theories abound: drought, overpopulation, resource depletion, political collapse, invasion. Most likely it was a combination. A slow unraveling. A thread pulled too tight, finally snapping. And the jungle reclaimed it all. But it didn't destroy it. It preserved it. That's the strangest part. These cities weren't crushed, they were tucked away, gently, as if the earth itself decided to put them to sleep, waiting for someone like you to look again. You hover now miles above the canopy. The green stretches forever. But you know better now. You know what lies beneath, and you realize this is just the beginning. There are thousands more square kilometers to scan, hundreds of cities to excavate, decades of research to be done, and the deeper we look, the clearer it becomes. The Maya didn't vanish. They simply receded. And their legacy, written in stone and silence, still hums beneath the trees. So as the plain banks left and the rainforest begins to fade beneath the horizon, you carry with you a new sense of scale. Not just of cities or pyramids, but of mystery itself. Because sometimes the most powerful discoveries aren't made with shovels. They're made with light. You leave behind the jungle's hidden geometry, the laser-lit revelations of Maya cities, and now enter a place that feels quieter, but in a more unsettling way. This next site isn't known for its grandeur or its scale. It has no towering monuments, no ancient highways. Instead, it lies in the mud, preserved not in stone or jungle, but in the delicate folds of peat. It's a place where time has curled in on itself, where the past still has a face. You've arrived in Northern Europe again, Denmark, Ireland, the Netherlands, parts of Britain. Not far from farmhouses and modern roads are bogs that hold some of archaeology's most haunting finds. Bodies eerily intact, curled in the dark earth, as if they just fell asleep. But they didn't. They were placed there, and one by one they began to resurface. You stand now before one of them, the famous Tollund man. Discovered in 1950 by two brothers digging peat for fuel, he was lying face down, eyes closed, lips still curved in a faint, almost peaceful expression. His skin leathery, but intact. His hair neatly combed, a leather cap still on his head. Around his neck, a rope tied in a noose. Historians still argue whether Tollund man was executed, sacrificed, or honored. But one thing is certain, he wasn't alone. Hundreds of similar remains have been discovered in bogs across Europe, each with its own quiet, disturbing story. Some were stabbed, others strangled. A few show signs of having been bludgeoned, burned, or ritually dismembered. Yet many were buried with care, naked, but not dumped, posed, but not forgotten. Why? That's the question that hovers over every peat-preserved corpse. Why were they placed here? Why so many? And why were they so well preserved? You see, the bogs themselves are peculiar environments. Low oxygen, high acidity, and constant moisture create a kind of natural refrigeration. Organic materials that would decay anywhere else, like skin, hair, and clothing, can last for millennia. Bone, oddly enough, tends to dissolve. So what we get are soft-tissue time travelers' faces from 2,000 years ago, staring back at us, silent and solemn. You crouch beside one such figure, Graubala man. Found in Denmark in the 1950s, his hair still clings to his scalp, his fingers still bear fingerprints. His throat was slit from ear to ear. Not a violent act of passion, according to researchers, but a precise incision, almost surgical. Ritualistic. Fringe theorists have plenty to say about the bog bodies. Some suggest extraterrestrial connections. Others whisper of time travelers, ancient experiments, or forgotten cults. But the mainstream theories are haunting in their own right. Many archaeologists believe the bogs were sacred spaces, thresholds between the living and the dead, the human and the divine, and that the people found there weren't victims of crime, but participants in ceremony. Perhaps they were offerings, sacrifices to ensure fertility, good harvests, peace. Maybe they were criminals condemned to a ritual death as punishment, or maybe they were volunteers chosen or self-offered for reasons we'll never fully grasp. Historians still argue about cultural context. These deaths occurred during the Iron Age, in a time of tribal kingdoms shifting powers and growing interaction with Rome. Were the bog sacrifices a response to cultural change? A desperate clinging to old gods? A political statement etched in blood and mud? You step away from the bodies and consider their other surroundings, the artifacts left with them. Some have been found with tools, others with amulets, food, or even flowers. Some lie alone. Others were clearly part of a sequence of deposits. These weren't random acts. They were part of a system, a belief, one that we're trying to interpret thousands of years too late through glass museum cases and carbon dating reports. And still, it's the faces that haunt you. Because unlike bones, faces make it personal. Tollund man doesn't look like a relic. He looks like someone who might speak if you leaned in close enough. Someone with thoughts, regrets, a family, a favorite song. Someone who lived a life and then ended it in a way that somehow landed him here in the peat to be remembered long after his name was lost. Some believe these people were chosen for their appearance, their social role, or even their perceived flaws. Others believe they were ritual proxies, killed in place of a king, or to absorb communal guilt. Whatever the case, their presence forces you to look beyond the grand gestures of ancient cultures, the pyramids, temples, roadways, and into something deeper, more human, more uncomfortable. And here's what might disturb you more than anything else. Many of these individuals show signs of repeated trauma, not just a single wound, but layers. A beating followed by strangulation, followed by drowning. This wasn't accidental. It was ceremony. A choreography of death meant to echo some mythic pattern or appease some unseen force. But even in the horror there's care. The bodies were placed deliberately, positioned gently, not thrown, not hidden, as if to say this was important. This mattered. You walk now through the museum gallery, dimly lit, hushed like a chapel. Tollund man lies behind glass, his face as serene as a sleeping monk, his hands folded, his body curled. And despite everything you've just heard, you find yourself leaning closer, not in fear, but in empathy, in curiosity. What did he think in his last moments? Did he believe in the gods? Did he volunteer? Was he terrified? At peace? Or did he think of something as simple as bread, or home, or a loved one's hand he'd never touch again? You'll never know. And neither will anyone else. That's the price of mystery. The bog doesn't give up stories. It gives up silence shaped like people. And as you step back out into the light, you carry with you that image not of grandeur or lost cities, but of a single face perfectly preserved. A whisper from 2,000 years ago, lips still slightly parted as if he was about to speak, and maybe in some way he just did. From the quiet peat bogs of northern Europe, you now travel farther back, much farther, to a time when myth and record blur, when kings ruled for lifetimes, measured not in decades, but in millennia. You're in Mesopotamia now, the cradle of civilization, where clay tablets outlast empires, and where one curious document whispers of something utterly impossible. It's called the Sumerian King List. At first glance, it looks like what you'd expect a record of rulers. Names, dynasties, lengths of reign, dates. Simple enough. Except it's not. Because some of these kings reigned not for 20 years, not even 200, but for 28,800 years. That's right, 28,000 years. Historians still argue whether this is myth metaphor or some forgotten historical truth. But the king list is real. Written in cuneiform on ancient clay tablets, it lists rulers before and after a great flood. Before the flood reigns are absurdly long. Afterward, they become more believable, hundreds of years, then, eventually, decades. It's a pattern that seems to echo something deeper, a fall, a shift, a recalibration of time itself. You kneel beside a replica of one of the tablets, now its surface marked with wedge-shaped characters pressed by reed stylus. The names feel unfamiliar, but evocative. Alulim, who ruled Eridu for 28,800 years, a Lalangar, who ruled for 36,000 ala. The cities are familiar in name, Eridu, Larsa, Shurapak, but the numbers are not. Mainstream scholars categorize this as mythologized history. They suggest the long reigns reflect symbolic ideas, perhaps cosmological numbers, or religious storytelling. But there's something odd about how methodically the list is presented. It doesn't read like a myth. It reads like a ledger, a list of leaders. Calm, clinical, unwavering in its absurdity. Some researchers believe the king list served a political purpose, that later kings used it to legitimize their rule by claiming continuity with a divine or mythic past. But even that explanation leaves a question: why those numbers? Why such precision? If you're inventing legends, why say someone ruled for 36,000 years, not just a very long time? You begin to see why this document has fascinated scholars and fringe theorists alike. The latter, of course, point to the flood narrative, a global deluge dividing time in two, a catastrophe that resets history. Sound familiar? Because you've heard it before in the Bible, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, in Hindu texts, even in indigenous American lore. Different cultures, same flood, same mysterious line between before and after. Could there have been a real flood? A cataclysmic event perhaps caused by melting glaciers or a sudden rise in sea level that wiped out early civilizations and their memory. Geologists point to the end of the last ice age around 11,000 years ago as a time of rapid environmental change. Coastal areas flooded, river valleys expanded. Maybe the flood was real, and maybe the king list remembers what came before it. And if that's the case, what were those civilizations? You stand now in your mind's eye in Eridu, the first city listed. Its ruins lie in modern-day Iraq, little more than mounds today, but once a center of culture and worship. Temples to Enki, god of wisdom and water. Ceremonial platforms. Ziggurats long since collapsed. But what if the Eridu we know is only the latest version? What if older foundations lie beneath, forgotten by time, ignored by history? Fringe theorists claim that the king list preserves memory not of gods, but of real rulers from a vanished epoch. They point to the curious consistency across tablets, the fact that multiple versions of the list found in different cities and from different centuries repeat the same names and numbers. It's not just a legend, it's a canon. Some go further, suggesting that these long-reigning kings weren't human at all, that they were demigods, beings of another order. Anunnaki, as they're sometimes called, deities or extraterrestrials in ancient astronaut theory, but divine rulers in original Sumerian mythology. The term literally means those who came from heaven to earth. Yes, that theory goes off the rails quickly, but it points to a deeper truth. The ancients believed their rulers came from the stars, that the line between gods and kings was not so sharp, that divine right wasn't symbolic, it was literal. Still, even if you set aside the cosmic speculation, the king list remains unsettling. Not just for what it says, but for how confidently it says it. There's no fanfare, no mythic language, just a name, a city, a span of years that would outlast 100 lifetimes, and then it moves on. It's that nonchalance that gets to you. It's as if the scribes saw nothing unusual in it, as if the passage of thousands of years was just administration. You imagine now a young Sumerian apprentice carefully pressing marks into wet clay. Maybe he asks his teacher, "Did Alalim really rule for that long?" And the teacher shrugs. "That's what we were told. Just copy the numbers." And that's the echo that reaches us. Not a proclamation, but a copy of a belief. Passed down not because it was understood, but because it was preserved. You stand now at the edge of understanding. The king list gives you no explanation, no moral, no mythic lesson, just data. Cold, impossible data that feels oddly honest. That forces you to wonder whether somewhere deep in humanity's prehistory we've lost entire chapters, not pages. Chapters. And maybe that's the greatest mystery of all. Not the flood, not the gods, not even the years. But the idea that people were trying to remember something, that they kept it on clay because clay survives, that they passed it forward until someone thousands of years later would sit in a museum, run their fingers over the tablet, and whisper, "Who were these kings? And why did they last so long?" You leave the dust of clay tablets behind, but the idea lingers of time stretching farther than seems possible, of names preserved longer than memories. Now you move somewhere quieter, quieter still. Not into a city, not into a tomb, but into a cave. A simple chamber of stone where two things lie side by side, a skull and a turtle shell. You're in Southeast Asia now, in Laos. And this chamber part of the Tam Pa Ling cave system isn't a monument or a temple. It's not famous for grandeur. But what it holds is something far stranger, a painted skull resting atop the back of a turtle shell, as if placed there on purpose, as if arranged in ceremony, or as a message. The discovery is recent. Not many people outside the archaeological community know of it. But that's often where the best mysteries live, in quiet, humble finds that make no headlines, yet rewrite entire timelines. Here's what we know: the skull is human, very old, possibly belonging to a modern Homo sapiens who lived tens of thousands of years ago. The bones show signs of deliberate placement, positioned, not tossed. And then there's the turtle shell, also ancient, resting beneath it, like a cradle. And if that weren't strange enough, both appear to have been stained, painted with red ochre. Historians still argue whether this was part of a burial ritual, a symbolic act, or something far more complex. But the implications ripple wide. Because this isn't a random pile of bones. This is composition, intent. You crouch beside it now, in the dimness of the cave. Your torchlight flickers across stone, casting long shadows. The air smells of mineral dampness and something else, age. And in front of you, this quiet arrangement. Skull, shell, red pigment smeared with purpose. Not art exactly, not burial exactly, but something between the two. Something older than either word. Turtle shells have long been symbols of longevity, of the cosmos, of the earth itself. In some mythologies, the world rests on the back of a turtle. In others, the turtle is a messenger between realms. Was that what the people here believed? Was the skull placed upon the shell as a kind of passage, a vehicle for the soul, a portable universe to carry the dead into the unknown? Or was it simpler? Perhaps this was a form of mourning, a family laying to rest someone they loved, combining two symbols, life and endurance, into one quiet tableau. Or maybe the shell came later, added by someone who found the bones and gave them meaning. Even now, archaeologists debate whether the painting was done at the time of death or centuries afterward. Fringe theorists, unsurprisingly, have their own interpretations. Some see the shell and skull as part of a shamanic rite, a prehistoric altar designed to enhance spiritual communication. Others suggest it's evidence of an early cosmology, proof that these ancient humans had symbolic thinking far more sophisticated than previously believed. But maybe that's the wrong angle. Maybe the mystery isn't why it was done, but that it was done at all. Because this little arrangement, modest and silent, tells you one thing with certainty: someone tens of thousands of years ago was thinking in symbols. That's what stays with you, not the turtle, not the skull, but the gesture. Because for so long we've imagined our ancient ancestors as functional beings, hunters, gatherers, tool users. And yet, here they are engaging in something abstract, something poetic. This isn't survival, this is storytelling, and it's done with objects, not words. The red ochre is a clue too. This pigment shows up all over the ancient world, in cave paintings, on bones, in graves. It was one of humanity's first colors, easy to make, hard to forget, and always used with purpose. Maybe as a symbol of blood, of life, of sacredness. Maybe it marked status. Maybe it just made things beautiful. But in this cave, the red ochre adds another layer of mystery. It marks the bones and the shell not in wild splashes, but in deliberate strokes. Someone cared what this looked like. They curated the moment. You reach out in your imagination and almost expect to feel the warmth of that gesture. The care, the time it took, not just to arrange, but to consider what the arrangement would mean. That in itself is astonishing. Historians still argue whether this was one person's act or a cultural practice, whether this cave was a singular resting place or part of a larger, still buried complex. But even if it stands alone, it speaks volumes. Because this scene predates writing, it predates agriculture, it predates the earliest cities, ziggurats, and stone temples. And yet, here it is, an arrangement of death that tells a story through symbol, texture, and color. It forces you to reconsider what it means to be human. Maybe being human isn't just about invention. Maybe it's about attention. The act of looking at something and choosing to make it sacred. You glance around the cave, wondering what else might lie beneath the floor. More bones, more shells, more arrangements that once meant something profound, and now only whisper fragments. We may never know who this person was, what they believed, what they saw when they died. But they were remembered, honored, laid to rest, not in chaos, but in composition. And somehow, through red dust and hollow bone, they reach across tens of thousands of years to say, "We were more than you think." You step back now, letting the cave take its silence again. The painted skull rests gently, as it always has. The turtle shell curves upward like a question. And in the dim light, the red pigment still glows faintly, like the ember of a story too old to tell, but too human to forget. The cave's silence lingers as you rise and walk into the heat. Now the air is no longer cool and damp, it's dry, almost searing. The land around you is golden and windswept. You're not in a jungle or a bog or a cave anymore. You're in the vast, open desert. But not just any desert. You're standing in the middle of the Sahara. It stretches in every direction, sand, sky, and silence. At first, it seems like nothing could live here, let alone build anything. And yet, scattered across this enormous sea of dust are formations that have no business being here. Circles, rows, stones carefully placed, patterns emerging from chaos. These are the stone circles of the Sahara, and they are as mysterious as they are ancient. You're in southern Algeria now, or perhaps Niger or Mali. The locations vary, the deserts blur, but the circles remain. Some are small, only a few feet across. Others span wide enough to be seen clearly from the sky, arranged with purpose, whispering of rituals long forgotten. Historians still argue what these circles were for. Burial worship, astronomy. The oldest among them could be more than 6,000 years old, older than the pyramids, older than the written word. They predate Islam, Christianity, and even the earliest kingdoms of Africa. These stones were set in place by people we barely know and can no longer name. You walk between the stones, now brushing your fingers across their sun-heated surfaces. There's something quieting about them, something strangely ordered. Some are arranged in concentric rings. Others point toward the horizon, or to the rising and setting of the sun. A few resemble maps, others celestial diagrams. One of the most famous sites, Nabta Playa, sits just west of Abu Simbel in southern Egypt. Here, in what was once a lush savanna before the Sahara turned to desert, lies a series of stones arranged in patterns that seem to track the movement of stars. The layout is so precise that some archaeologists have compared it to Stonehenge. But here's the difference: Nabta Playa may predate Stonehenge by 1,000 years. Fringe theorists love Nabta Playa. They point to its alignment with Orion's belt, to carvings that resemble cow deities and solar calendars, to the idea that this site wasn't just an observatory, but a message encoded in rock and silence meant to survive the shifting sands of time. Mainstream researchers tread more carefully. They acknowledge the astronomical alignments, but emphasize the cultural context. Nabta Playa was built by pastoralists, people who herded cattle and moved with the rains. These stones, they argue, were practical calendars for tracking seasons, ritual sites for rainmaking, social markers for scattered tribes. But still, the precision, the effort. You pause beside one particular circle, half buried in sand. The stones are small, not much higher than your knee, but they form a perfect ring, and at the center, a single upright slab casting a long shadow. You crouch, watch the shadow move. Was it used to tell time, to mark solstice? Or was the act of watching the shadow itself the ritual? That's the beauty of these circles. They don't tell you what to think. They invite you to wonder. Because the Sahara wasn't always a desert. Thousands of years ago, it was green, full of lakes, rivers, wildlife. Early humans flourished here, carving symbols into rock-building ceremonial sites, leaving behind clues in the form of stone alignments and burial mounds. Then the climate changed, slowly, relentlessly. The rains moved south, the grass dried, the people moved. But the stones, they stayed. Some believe the desert became sacred because of this. That as the land died, people honored what was lost. That these circles are not just astronomical, but memorials, time capsules, markers left behind by those who had to leave, but wanted to say we were here. We mattered. One burial circle in Mali was found to contain human remains positioned with shells from hundreds of miles away. Offerings, or messages, or both. In another site, stone alignments stretch for kilometers-long rows, like runways pointing toward what no one knows. And maybe that's the point. You can't help but compare it to other stone circles: Stonehenge, Göbekli Tepe, the Karnak stones of France. Is this a pattern? Did ancient cultures all over the world feel compelled to arrange stones in circles, align them to stars, and leave no explanation behind? Or is it just that a circle is what you make when you're trying to represent something eternal? Some researchers suggest the stone circles of the Sahara may have influenced the great monuments of Egypt. That pastoralists who once gathered at Nabta Playa moved north as the land dried and brought their cosmology with them. That before pyramids, there were circles. Before written myths, there were stones in the sand. And now you're walking among them. There's no rope around them, no signs, no fences, just the wind and the heat and the feeling that something important happened here. That long before maps or nation-states, people were watching the sky, tracking the sun, arranging stones not for shelter, but for meaning. You look up. The sky is cloudless, bright, infinite. Maybe the same stars they watched still drift overhead, unchanged. Maybe those ancient builders knelt right where you're standing, tying string around sticks, marking the movement of shadows, trying to understand something far bigger than themselves. And maybe that's what archaeology really is. Not about the answers, but the questions people asked long ago still echoing in stone. You step back now, the stones shrinking behind you, half lost in the ever-moving sand. There's no plaque, no inscription, no name, but you feel it. This was a place of thinking, of wondering, of watching the sky and wondering how long it would all last. And against the odds, it's still here. A circle in the sand, waiting. The desert winds fade behind you, carrying with them the echo of stone circles and ancient skies. Now you step into a place described in legend, but rarely seen, perhaps, because it no longer exists, or perhaps because it was never meant to be found. You're in Egypt again, but not in the Egypt of pharaohs and pyramids. You're searching for something deeper, stranger. something buried so thoroughly that most people believe it's just a myth. This is the story of the labyrinth, an underground city so vast and complex that even ancient historians could barely believe it existed. Herodotus, the Greek historian, writing in the 5th century BCE, described it with awe. He claimed to have seen it with his own eyes, calling it more impressive than even the pyramids. A colossal structure near the city of Crocodilopolis. Yes, that was the actual name, featuring 3,000 rooms, some above ground, some below. Temples, halls, courts, corridors that twisted endlessly. You're standing now in that flat, dusty expanse where it's believed to have once stood at Hawara near the Fayum oasis. There's little to see. Some stone ruins, a few shallow mounds, a canal that seems too straight to be natural. The ground gives no hint of what Herodotus described, but then again, neither did the jungle until LiDAR lit it up. Could the labyrinth be real? Historians still argue. After Herodotus, other ancient writers, Strabo, Diodorus, Pliny, also mention it. Their accounts differ in detail, but agree on scale. Strabo called it a marvelous structure, noting its columns and roofs carved from single blocks of stone. Diodorus spoke of tombs beneath the floors. Pliny said it was built to guard the sacred crocodile of Lake Moeris. But here's the thing, they weren't describing myth. They thought it was history. Modern archaeology has tried to find it. In the late 1800s, British Egyptologist Flinders Petrie excavated at Hawara. He found remnants of a temple, fragments of walls, and foundations of massive stone columns. But he didn't find the labyrinth. Not in full, anyway. Then, in the early 2000s, a Belgian-Egyptian expedition used ground-penetrating radar at Hawara. What they detected beneath the sand was extraordinary, a massive network of cavities and chambers arranged in a grid. Rectangular voids beneath the surface, possibly man-made, possibly rooms. But for reasons still debated, politics funding preservation, the site was reburied and sealed. And that's where the mystery sits. You crouch now at the edge of one of the old trenches, brushing your hand through the dust. The sand shifts easily here. Too easily. As if it's hiding something soft, something deliberately filled in. You close your eyes and try to imagine what Herodotus saw: endless rooms, every wall engraved with hieroglyphs, every passage lit by oil lamps flickering in the stale air. A place built not for living, but for remembering. Some scholars believe the labyrinth was built during the reign of Amenemhat III, a Middle Kingdom pharaoh who ruled over 3,800 years ago. His pyramid stands nearby, weathered and worn. It once had a black granite burial chamber polished to a mirror sheen. If anyone could have commanded such a vast construction effort, it was him. But why build a labyrinth? Theories abound. A massive tomb complex, a ceremonial calendar encoded in architecture, a prison for the body after death. Or maybe something more symbolic, a map of the cosmos rendered in limestone. A guide for the soul through the afterlife. A place where priests moved through mazes of meaning, performing rituals in hidden chambers to keep the balance of the world intact. Fringe theorists, of course, push further. They claim the labyrinth was a library, not of scrolls, but of stone tablets, records of a civilization lost to time. The wisdom of a forgotten era sealed underground to survive future cataclysms. Some even believe that beneath the labyrinth lies another level deeper, older, connecting to the Hall of Records said to lie beneath the Sphinx. And yet, all we have are partial foundations, satellite images, ground radar, and the words of historians who lived thousands of years closer to the truth than we do. You walk the site now in your mind. The heat beats down, but the ground beneath your feet feels hollow. Somewhere down there, if the radar is correct, are chambers, possibly intact, possibly collapsed. What might be inside? Artifacts, carvings, maps of stars' bones, or perhaps nothing at all. Just empty space abandoned by time, mistaken by history. And that's what makes it so maddening. You stand on the edge of belief and uncertainty. There are no tour buses here, no souvenir stands, just the wind and the sand and a series of ridges that don't quite make sense. You kneel and pick up a fragment of stone, weathered, curved, possibly part of a column. It tells you nothing and everything. Because the idea of the labyrinth is more than just a physical structure. It's a metaphor, a symbol, a statement that knowledge isn't easy, that truth is buried, twisted, lost behind walls of speculation and half-remembered facts. To search for it is to walk corridors that double back on themselves, to find rooms that lead nowhere. And once in a while, if you're lucky, a door opens. Maybe the labyrinth isn't just under your feet. Maybe it's in the way we explore the past, one chamber at a time, one mystery at a time, accepting that we may never reach the center. And yet we keep walking, because even if the labyrinth has been lost or never fully existed, the search for it reveals something far more valuable. Our need to believe that the ancients had something more to say, something so important they carved it in stone and buried it deep, so that we, thousands of years later, might one day find it, or at least dream that we could. From the lost labyrinth of Hawara, where underground echoes are chased more often than found, your path now follows a quieter trail, one not beneath the earth, but locked inside simple clay pots. You're in Iraq now, specifically just outside modern-day Baghdad, and you're standing in a dusty museum storeroom, eyeing an object that looks entirely unimpressive. It's small, clay, cracked, roughly the size of a coffee mug. But inside, it sits something that shouldn't be there. A copper cylinder, a corroded iron rod, a plug of asphalt sealing the top. It looks more like forgotten plumbing than an artifact, but it has a name now: the Baghdad Battery. Historians still argue whether it was ever a battery at all, but the mystery refuses to fade. The first of these curious objects was unearthed in the 1930s during excavations near Kujut Rabu, a village just southeast of Baghdad. Wilhelm König, a German archaeologist and museum curator, examined the artifacts and made a bold suggestion. What if this was a simple galvanic cell, a 2,000-year-old battery? All the parts were there. An iron rod suspended in a copper tube, a ceramic jar to hold an acidic solution like vinegar or lemon juice. It was, mechanically speaking, viable. When modern scientists recreated it, it produced a small electrical current. Was it meant to? That's where the mystery begins. You hold the idea gently in your hands. Imagine ancient Parthian artisans, roughly 200 BCE to 200 CE, crafting these objects. There's no mention of electricity in their texts, no wires, no circuitry. And yet, here's this strange clay pot quietly challenging what we think the past was capable of. Mainstream archaeologists are cautious. Many suggest the Baghdad Battery may have had a different use, perhaps, as a storage vessel for scrolls or sacred objects. Others propose it was used in electroplating to coat objects in thin layers of gold or silver. Yet, even that theory is debated, as no electroplated artifacts have been conclusively linked to Parthian-era Iraq. Fringe theorists, on the other hand, revel in the implications. Some claim the batteries were part of a lost electrical tradition, remnants of a forgotten technology that once lit ancient temples or powered mysterious tools. Others link them to even more speculative ideas: healing devices, energy transmitters, even ancient forms of communication. You walk through a mental gallery now, seeing rows of these strange jars lined up along a temple wall. A priest dips a vinegary solution inside. A faint spark, a flicker of reaction. What was it used for? A ceremonial jolt, an arc of light to signal the divine? Or was it simply an accident, someone assembling everyday objects in a way that unintentionally created current? But here's the strange part. Multiple jars have been found. Not one. Several. And though their numbers are small, The repeatability of the design is suspicious. If this were a coincidence, why does it keep showing up? You crouch in your imagination at an excavation site. A clay shard is pulled from the dirt. A copper cylinder rolls loose. Another battery. Another question. Why would people who had no known understanding of electricity build an object that behaves like a battery? Maybe the real answer is simpler and more profound. Maybe they didn't understand electricity as we do. Maybe they observed that mixing certain metals and liquids caused a strange reaction, a tingle on the skin, a glow if paired with certain materials. And instead of charting it, they incorporated it into ritual, into medicine, into belief. There's some speculation that small shocks were used in ancient healing practices. The Greeks and Romans certainly believed in the medicinal use of electric fish. Could the Parthians have done something similar, harnessing a shock from metal and juice instead of biology? Historians still argue. Some dismiss the battery idea entirely, calling it an anachronistic fantasy. Others remain open, noting that our understanding of ancient science is still rudimentary. After all, how many manuscripts have we lost? How many tools like this jar sit unlabeled in museum basements, catalogued as miscellaneous ceramics? And what if the Baghdad Battery wasn't an outlier? What if it was part of a broader tradition, one we just haven't pieced together yet? Maybe there were larger versions, different versions. Maybe they used them in temples or homes, in medicine or metallurgy, and we've simply lost the context. You pick up the jar again in your mind. Run your fingers along the iron rod, brittle and rusted. There's nothing high-tech about it. But that's the point. This isn't the kind of object that survives in the grand halls of museums. It survives quietly. An orphan of a forgotten idea. The real story might never emerge fully. But it reminds you that technology doesn't always arrive in straight lines. It loops, stutters, appears, and disappears. Sometimes what we think is new has roots far older than we imagine. You walk out of the museum, the sun baking the stone streets of Baghdad. Around you, life moves forward. Cars, voices, the smell of street food rising into the air. But beneath all of it, somewhere in the dust and layers of earth, might still lie a better version of the battery. A clearer example. A missing piece. And if we find it, it might not change history, but it will remind us of something even more important, that the ancients were always experimenting. Not just with survival, but with possibility. They didn't wait for electricity to be invented. They may have touched it, felt it, harnessed it briefly, then left it behind, like a story half-finished, like a flicker in a jar. You leave the dust of Baghdad behind, but a single question trails after you, like a breeze. What else have we missed? What other secrets lie wrapped in plain sight, dismissed, because they don't fit the script? This time, you're not walking. You're soaring above Peru. Below, the world flattens into ribbons of brown and red. Arid plains stretch toward the distant Andes. From the ground, it looks empty, lifeless. But from the sky, everything changes. You're flying over the Nazca lines. They're huge, impossibly huge, etched into the dry plateau like scars made by giants. Spiders, hummingbirds, monkeys, humans, trees, spirals, trapezoids, designs so massive that you'd never recognize them unless you were high above. And here's the problem. No one's quite sure why they exist. Historians still argue whether the Nazca people who flourished between 200 BCE and 600 CE created these geoglyphs for gods, for rituals, or for something more practical. What we do know is that they scraped away the reddish topsoil to reveal lighter-colored sediment beneath. No machines, no GPS, just lines perfectly straight, sometimes stretching for miles. You touch down now, mentally walking across one of the lines. It's barely visible up close, just a shallow groove maybe 4 inches deep, yet it's part of a spiral pattern over 100 feet wide. How did they design it without aerial perspective? Some suggest they used grids and ropes. Others believe they walked the outlines repeatedly, memorizing each curve. And yet, that doesn't explain the precision. One of the most famous figures is the hummingbird, delicate and sharp, its beak a straight line pointing for hundreds of feet. Others include a monkey with a curling tail, a spider with legs like clock hands, and a set of massive trapezoids, flat expanses that look like landing strips from above. And that's where the theories take off. Fringe theorists have long proposed that the Nazca lines were ancient airfields used by visitors not of this world. They point to the scale, the precision, the mysterious wear patterns. Some even claim the monkey figure mimics constellations visible only from high altitudes. But perhaps there's a more human mystery here. Many archaeologists believe the Nazca lines were part of ceremonial processions paths to be walked during rituals that invoked rain fertility or celestial harmony. The desert floor, after all, never sees rain. So what better way to ask the gods for water than to draw messages across the earth itself? You walk along one of the longest lines now, miles of perfect straightness, not a wobble, not a deviation. Some of these lines run completely true for distances that seem impossible without modern tools. No mountains in the way, no obstacles, just the pure will to carve direction into chaos. Some believe the lines point to water sources, ancient aquifers hidden beneath the earth. Others align with solstices, stars, or even mountain peaks. The more we map them, the more patterns seem to emerge. And yet every pattern feels like it leads to another question. One curious discovery came in the 1990s, when researchers found that some of the animal figures have no beginning or end. The lines are continuous, like a single unbroken thought. You'd have to walk them exactly like a labyrinth to understand the full shape, not just from above, but from within. Maybe the designs weren't meant to be seen. Maybe they were meant to be experienced. You imagine the Nazca people walking these lines in silence, hundreds of feet between them, chanting, praying, each step a syllable in a language now lost. The figures below their feet invisible, yet somehow still felt. A choreography for gods. A language written across a desert that never forgets. Then there's the wear. Some of the lines appear heavily eroded not by time, but by repeated human activity. Foot traffic, ritual walks, centuries of movement. These weren't static drawings. They were living maps, maybe even pathways to altered states of consciousness, a kind of spiritual geography. One figure, the spider, has captured unusual attention. It matches almost exactly the anatomy of a rare Amazonian spider that lives hundreds of miles away. The Nazca had no microscopes, no maps of distant ecosystems. So, how did they get the anatomy right? Was it artistic luck, trade knowledge, or something more mysterious, like symbolic insight passed down from a time we no longer remember? Historians still argue. And while most dismiss alien runway theories as fantasy, even the most skeptical researchers agree the Nazca lines are unique, not just in scale, but in purpose. Nowhere else in the world have humans written so massively, so mysteriously upon the earth. You ascend now in your imagination, rising once more above the pampa. The lines stretch out like veins, geometries of faith, science, and something in between. A spider crawls across the desert. A bird prepares for flight. A series of lines converge like a compass without a center. And in that moment you realize something. These were not messages to us. These weren't signs left behind for a future audience. They were messages for the gods, for the sky, for the unknown. They weren't made to be understood. They were made to be offered. Like all great mysteries, they are less about the answer and more about the gesture. Because when you carve a hummingbird into the earth, hundreds of feet long in a place that never rains, never grows, and never forgets, you're not trying to explain anything. You're trying to be remembered. From the vast canvas of the Nazca Desert, you now step into a place so remote, so difficult to reach, that for centuries it remained untouched, hidden not by jungle or sand, but by sheer geography. You're in the highlands of the Caucasus now, where winds scrape the mountains and time lingers in the cracks of stone. This is the land of the megalithic towers of the North Caucasus, particularly in the regions of Ingushetia and Chechnya. Here, far from the well-trodden paths of ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia, rise stone towers and complexes that seem to defy both age and explanation. Little known outside of specialist circles, these structures are some of the most enigmatic in Europe. You're walking now through a narrow valley. The terrain is rugged cliffs rise like frozen waves on either side, and under your feet the earth feels old. Then just ahead, a silhouette emerges from the mist, a tall, narrow tower made of dry stacked stone, its base square, its top gently tapering. No mortar, no modern reinforcements, yet it stood for centuries, maybe longer. Historians still argue about how old these towers really are. Most are dated between the 12th and 17th centuries based on stylistic evidence and oral traditions. But some appear far older, possibly dating back to the early medieval period or even earlier. And as usual, the deeper you dig, the murkier the story becomes. Some of these towers reach 5 stories high, their interiors containing spiral staircases, defensive slots, hidden chambers. Others stand in clusters like watchful sentinels over the valleys below. In places like Erzi Targim and Vovnushki, entire complexes of towers cling to the mountainside, arranged in geometric harmony with the cliffs, rivers, and sky. But what were they for? Mainstream archaeologists generally believe they served as defensive structures, fortified family homes built by highland clans to protect against invaders. They're often located on strategic passes and ridgelines with commanding views of the landscape. And yet their construction feels excessive, over-engineered. Built not just for war, but for statement. You enter one of the towers now. The interior is surprisingly spacious. The stones fit so tightly together that even after hundreds of years, no mortar has crumbled, no gaps have widened. Light filters in through slits in the walls, casting thin blades across the dusty floor. The echo of your breath bounces back at you. It feels more like a temple than a fortress. Some scholars have proposed that the towers had ceremonial functions, that their height symbolized connection to the divine, or that they marked sacred territory. Local legends often describe them as places of spiritual power or as homes for revered ancestors. And then there are the burials. Surrounding many towers are stone crypts, small house-shaped mausoleums, some with sloping roofs, and precise alignment to cardinal directions. Inside, bones lie arranged sometimes in seated positions, sometimes surrounded by offerings. These crypts, too, are built with astonishing care, like miniatures of the towers themselves. Some even appear to have been reused over generations, as if the lineage of stone matched the lineage of blood. You touch the wall of one crypt now. It's cool, silent, and deeply intentional. Everything here was built to last. And not just the stones, the memory. Local oral traditions describe a time when giants walked these valleys, when the towers were built not just for defense, but for glory, for something that might be called honor or magic. In some tales, the towers are said to resonate with certain chants or align with stars. Sound familiar? You begin to notice a pattern. From Göbekli Tepe in Turkey to the stone circles of the Sahara to the pyramids of Mexico and Peru, ancient peoples everywhere built tall, precise, and symbolic. The towers of the Caucasus, while less known, fit this rhythm. They are part of the great hum of forgotten architecture monuments that weren't just shelters, but declarations. And still questions remain. Some towers appear in places that defy logic, perched on spires of rock accessible only by narrow trails or ladders. They seem built more for display than practicality. Others are isolated, standing alone in valleys where no village remains. What purpose did they serve? What enemy did they watch for? Fringe theorists, as always, have theories. Some suggest the towers are far older than assumed, built by a lost pre-Christian civilization and later adopted by highland tribes. Others point to unusual astronomical alignments, and a few go even further, proposing the towers were energy conductors, part of a worldwide grid of ancient resonance-based structures. You take a breath, slow, measured. Maybe the truth is simpler, maybe it's harder. Maybe these towers, like the Nazca lines or the Hypogeum, weren't built to impress outsiders. Maybe they were made to center a people. To say this is where we are. This is who we were. This is where our bones rest, and where our names will echo. You step out into the mountain light again. The tower casts a long shadow behind you. Wind rushes down the valley. A raven lifts off from the tower's peak, soaring out over the stone landscape. And suddenly this place doesn't feel remote. It feels deeply present, like the towers are still watching, still listening. And in their silence, they ask you the same thing. They asked every traveler who passed this way centuries ago. Do you remember? The wind in the Caucasus carries your thoughts onward until the towers vanish behind the ridges, and you're pulled once again into heat. But not the dry, echoing heat of a desert. This is different, damp, alive. It clings to your skin like memory. You're in Cambodia now, deep in the forests north of Siem Reap. The trees tower above you, their roots gripping stones like skeletal fingers. Lianas twist through the canopy. Parrots screech overhead. And then through the green, the outlines emerge, towers of stone, broken but proud. Faces staring through the leaves. Roads once wide, now swallowed by forest. Welcome to Angkor. But this isn't Angkor Wat, the grand temple with its 5 lotus towers that tourists know. This is the other Angkor, the hidden one. The one that LiDAR revealed piece by piece beneath centuries of jungle. This is the city that once surrounded the temple. A city so vast, so advanced, that its rediscovery has rewritten the history of Southeast Asia. Historians still argue whether Angkor was the largest pre-industrial city in the world. But when LiDAR scanning began in the 2010s, the results were staggering. Beneath the forest floor lay roads, canals, reservoirs, neighborhoods, and grid-like layouts stretching for hundreds of square kilometers. The temples were only the tip of the stone iceberg. You imagine yourself in the air again, high above the treetops. The jungle may look wild, but now you know its hiding structure. Ancient avenues align with the cardinal directions. Reservoirs, barrays stretch for miles, their shape still visible through vegetation. Entire urban blocks appear beneath the trees, like a faded map sketched by ghosts. And this city, it wasn't built in a single burst. Angkor evolved over centuries, starting with Yasodharapura in the 9th century, reaching its peak under Jayavarman VII in the late 12th. By then, the Khmer Empire had grown into a marvel of hydraulic engineering, because that's what Angkor was at heart, not just a religious complex, but a water city. You land gently now mentally and walk beside one of the canals. It's dry today, overgrown, but the embankments are unmistakable. The Khmer civilization managed to tame the monsoon, storing water in massive reservoirs and directing it through a network of moats, weirs, and channels. In the dry season, the city drank. In the wet, it survived. Some researchers call it an organic machine, an ecological engine that allowed the Khmer to feed, bathe, and bless a population of nearly 1 million. For context, that's more than London or Paris had at the same time. And yet, for centuries, this vast city remained forgotten. Angkor Wat never disappeared completely. It remained a pilgrimage site, but the city around it faded. Covered in moss, swallowed by time. It wasn't until lasers pierced the canopy that we began to truly see it again. Fringe theorists leapt into the story, of course. They suggested that the grid was too precise, the canals too vast to be built without advanced technology. Some proposed that Angkor was aligned to constellations or part of an energy grid stretching across ancient sites worldwide. But even the mainstream story is astonishing. Imagine walking through Angkor at its height. Stone temples every few blocks. Homes made of wood long since vanished. Bells ringing from towers. Monks walking in saffron robes. Children playing in courtyards. Dancers practicing under colonnades. And above it all, the massive Bayon Temple, its many towers carved with serene faces watching in every direction. And then slowly the unraveling. By the 15th century, the city was in decline. Why historians still argue. Climate change, perhaps droughts, followed by catastrophic floods that overwhelmed the water system. Political instability, shifts in trade routes, possibly all of the above. What's strange is how quietly Angkor seems to have faded. There's no evidence of massive battles or plunder, just a gradual retreat. A city returned to the forest, a memory half submerged in roots and vines. You walk now through Ta Prohm, one of the few temples left partially unrestored. Here, nature and stone are tangled together. A tree grows atop a wall, its roots dripping down like frozen water. The walls are carved with Apsara's celestial dancers, who now perform only for birds and beetles. And yet, it feels alive. Angkor isn't a ruin in the typical sense. It doesn't feel dead. It feels dreaming. Some researchers believe there are still more structures hidden underground temples that haven't been mapped, neighborhoods that haven't been cleared. The city is too vast, too layered to ever be fully recovered. And maybe it shouldn't be. Maybe part of its magic is the way it remains half seen, half remembered. You touch a wall, run your fingers across the bas-reliefs. Scenes of battles, court ceremonies, mythic beings. One figure, half human, half bird, stares back at you with a gaze carved 900 years ago. And in that moment, you feel it. This place wasn't built just to impress. It was built to endure, not just in stone, but in silence. The Khmer believed in cycles, rebirth, renewal. They built their city like a mandala, carefully symbolically meant to mirror the cosmos. When it fell, they didn't erase it. They left it to the forest as if letting it return to its own beginning. And now, centuries later, the forest has let us peek inside again, just enough to remember. As you walk back through the jungle, the path overgrown but familiar, now you hear the distant hum of insects, the creak of a tree, and for a moment, maybe the echo of drums from a celebration long past. Because some cities don't vanish. They just close their eyes. You step softly out of the humid jungle of Angkor, and the forest closes behind you like a curtain. Now the world grows colder, sharper. The air changes. It's not heavy with moisture anymore. It's crisp, dry, laced with the scent of stone and salt. You're standing in Scotland now, on an island battered by wind and rain, where grass clings to cliffs like fur, and where sheep wander between ruins older than the Bible. Here on the Isle of Lewis, tucked into the lonely northwestern edge of Europe, lies one of the most quietly powerful mysteries on Earth, the Callanish stones. Not as famous as Stonehenge, not as massive as the pyramids, but perhaps even more enigmatic. You walk among them now in the pale northern light. Tall, slender stones rise from the heather-covered ground like frozen sentinels. Some tilt slightly, others lean toward each other like they're whispering. They form a rough cross centered by a circular ring with a tomb or chamber-like structure at the heart. Historians still argue what the Callanish stones were built for. The usual suspects are here, of course, ritual astronomy burial, but nothing fits quite perfectly. The alignment is too strange, the placement too deliberate. One line of stones points almost exactly to where the midsummer moon sets. Not the sun, not the equinox. The moon. A rare complex alignment known as the lunar standstill, an event that occurs only once every 18.6 years when the moon's rising and setting points reach their most extreme northern and southern limits. You pause there at that stone. Imagine the effort required to track the moon's movements over 2 decades, without instruments, without calendars, just by watching. Imagine the dedication, the memory, the time. That's what makes Callanish so strange. It feels like a clock, but not for hours or days. A clock built to measure decades, lifetimes. Fringe theorists have had a field day, of course. Some say the stones are a star map. Others claim the site is part of a global grid of energy points aligning with the pyramids, Easter Island, and the Nazca lines. Some even believe the stones were erected by survivors of Atlantis who brought with them ancient knowledge of the heavens. Mainstream archaeologists keep their feet on the mossy ground. They point to Callanish as a late Neolithic site likely built between 2900 and 2600 BCE. Part of a wider megalithic tradition across the British Isles and Brittany. But even they admit the site's purpose remains unclear. You walk around the circle now slowly. There's a heaviness here, but not oppressive, more like reverence. The stones don't feel dead. They feel aware, as if they've been standing so long that time has bent around them. And unlike Stonehenge, Callanish doesn't feel engineered. It feels placed. The stones are not carved into precise shapes. They're rough weathered, full of natural edges and fractures. Chosen, not shaped. Found, not forced. Some look like people. One in particular is called the Sleeping Beauty. Legend says that a giant woman lies beneath the ground turned to stone for refusing to convert to Christianity. Others say the stones are ancient druids petrified mid-ritual. The locals call them Fyr Braiga, the false men. You pause again. Look up. The sky here changes fast. Clouds roll in like breath. Light flickers through breaks in the gray, turning the stones from pale to gold to almost blue. The people who built this place lived in stone houses. They farmed, fished, looked up at the same moon you do now, and yet they chose to spend years, decades maybe hauling these stones into place. Why? Historians still argue. Some say Callanish was a sacred site where seasonal gatherings marked the movement of the sky. Others believe it was a community center, a place of storytelling, teaching, trading. A few suspect it was a burial ground or a place of initiation. But what if it was all of those things? What if the stones weren't meant to serve a single purpose? What if they were a kind of prehistoric cathedral where time and space and spirit met in stone? You kneel by one of the shorter stones now, hand on the lichen-covered surface. It's cold, smooth in places where hands have touched it for centuries. There's no inscription, no date, just mass, presence. And somehow that's more powerful than writing. You look out across the moor and realize there are other circles here, smaller ones, satellite sites scattered across the landscape. Some with standing stones, others with only the stumps remaining. Callanish wasn't alone. It was part of a network, a region-wide ritual system all connected by lines we no longer see. And here's something strange. The shape of the main Callanish site, the central ring with radiating rows, matches patterns seen as far away as Peru, as Turkey, as India. Not identical, but familiar. Spoked wheels, crosses in circles, designs that keep appearing as if memory lingers, not just in minds, but in shapes. Were these just coincidences or echoes? You may never know, but you can feel something as you walk between the stones, a rhythm, a quiet pulse. Not of the earth exactly, but of human time. The kind that marks not just the rising of moons or the turning of seasons, but the need to understand, to mark, to say, we were here, we saw, we remembered. You step back from the center of the circle. The wind tugs your jacket, the sea glints beyond the hills, and the stones stand quiet, not ancient, just steady. They don't answer your questions, but they let you ask, and that maybe is what they were built for, The stone sentinels of Kallanish fade into the mist behind you, but the quiet they leave stays with you. Now your feet carry you far farther than you thought possible. Across continents over time. You land somewhere remote, somewhere where the past isn't buried beneath cities or jungle, but woven into the grass, the wind and the bones of the earth itself. You're in the Pacific. More precisely, you're on the scattered coral atolls and volcanic peaks of Micronesia. This is Nan Madol, a city unlike any other. Built atop a lagoon off the coast of Pohnpei Island, it floats between worlds sea and land life, and death the ordinary and the impossible. You approach it now by boat, the water glassy beneath you. The site stretches ahead dozens of small islets connected by tidal canals, each topped with looming basalt walls and ruins of once grand buildings. It looks like Venice made by giants. Quiet, dreamlike, out of time. And it's real. Nan Madol is made of basalt columns, giant hexagonal blocks that naturally form in volcanic flows. But here they've been stacked massive logs of stone laid like timber into walls 20 feet high. No mortar, no modern machinery, just thousands of tons of stone, some weighing as much as 50 tons each, transported across ocean and marsh. No one knows how. Historians still argue whether the city was begun around the 8th century or much earlier. The oral traditions say it was built by two brothers, Olosopa and Olisipa, who came from a distant land, bringing with them the knowledge of the gods. With magic or technology, we're not told they floated the stones across the sea and stacked them into a city. It sounds like a legend. Until you see the stones. You disembark and walk slowly through the ruins. There are about 100 artificial islets in total, each built with layers of coral and stone. Some are ceremonial. Some were once residential. Others seem like mausoleums or tombs. The largest structure, Nan Duwas, is a fortress-like enclosure that once served as the sacred center of the city. Its walls rise from the water like something out of myth. And then there are the canals. They snake between the islets, giving the entire site the feel of a floating city. Historians compare it to Venice, but Nan Madol came first by centuries, possibly a millennium. Who built this place and why? Mainstream scholars believe it was the ceremonial and political seat of the Saudeleur dynasty, which ruled Pohnpei until around the 16th century. The site may have housed priests, nobles, and rulers separate from the general population, a city of elites, a place of governance and ritual. But here's what doesn't add up. Pohnpei is covered in thick jungle and volcanic mountains. There are no basalt quarries near Nan Madol. The closest sources of columnar basalt are far inland. That means the builders had to cut, move, and float these multi-ton stones across miles of difficult terrain, then arrange them with architectural precision in water. No cranes, no wheels, no pulleys that we know of. Some theorists propose that logs were used to roll the stones. But that begs another question. How do you roll a 50-ton column over swampy ground and still have enough manpower left to lift and position it like a game of megalithic Jenga? Others say rafts were used, but the buoyancy required to float that much stone would require barges larger than anything known to have existed in the Pacific at the time. Fringe theorists step in, of course. Some suggest ancient anti-gravity knowledge. Others hint at lost civilizations, Lemuria, Mu, even Atlantis. But even without invoking the paranormal, Nan Madol challenges everything we thought we knew about island societies and engineering. And then there's the mystery of abandonment. By the time Westerners encountered the ruins in the 19th century, Nan Madol had long been deserted. Local stories spoke of curses of ghosts of spirits who walk the canals at night. Even today, many islanders refuse to visit the site after dark. They say the place remembers. You walk through a collapsed corridor now, basalt blocks jutting like teeth from the sea. Seaweed sways between them, gentle and slow. Above you, a tree has rooted into the wall itself, its limbs twisted into the stone. Time is folding everything back into silence. And yet, there's something unmistakable about Nan Madol. It's not just ruins, it's intent. A place shaped with purpose, built in defiance of its environment. Coral and saltwater rise and fall with the tide, yet the foundations still stand. Some walls remain dry and sharp-edged after 1,000 years of sea. One scholar once described Nan Madol as the only ancient city built on the ocean. And it is. No other known culture constructed an entire ceremonial complex atop a reef. No one else left behind such a city without so much as a single written word to explain it. You wonder now, standing at the edge of a quiet channel, whether that was the point. Maybe Nan Madol was never meant to be remembered in writing. Maybe it was designed to be experienced, walked, lived, let go. Because that's the strange beauty of it. The more you learn, the less you can explain. And yet, the wonder doesn't fade. It deepens. Maybe the city wasn't built for us to understand. Maybe it was built as an offering, or a calendar, or a monument to an idea that's now gone, something as weightless and massive as the stones themselves. You step back into your boat, drift away. The walls grow smaller behind you, then vanish behind reeds and tide. And just before they disappear, you glance over your shoulder one last time. Nan Madol doesn't move. It waits, like it always has. Nan Madol dissolves into the ocean mist behind you, leaving only a ripple across still water and an even deeper one across your thoughts. Now you rise again. Not up into the sky, but back in time. Farther than you expect. Farther, perhaps, than anyone imagined humans had gone. You're in Australia. The outback stretches around you like an endless breath, red, raw, ancient. The ground beneath your boots is dust and stone and heat, but also story. And in a quiet, shaded rock shelter in the Arnhem Land region of the Northern Territory, you find something that stops you cold. On the wall in front of you is a painting, faded yet unmistakably deliberate. A human-like figure, elongated limbs, eyes wide, a halo around its head. It's not recent. It's not Roman Greek or even Neolithic. It's tens of thousands of years old. This is Aboriginal rock art, some of the oldest surviving art on Earth. But it's more than decoration, it's memory, it's record. And in many ways, it's a map of the mind. You stand now in awe before the Wandjina figure's ancestral spirits from the Dreamtime, the Aboriginal belief system that describes the world's creation and its continual renewal. Wandjina are often painted with wide eyes, no mouth, and surrounded by halos or headdresses. They're guardians of the land and the sky. They bring rain in force law and remain present, watching silent sacred. The rock art is layered. Some figures have been painted over many times, each generation renewing the symbols, maintaining the power. The Aboriginal people say the Wandjina are not just pictures. They are. They reside in the rocks. They listen. They remember. And while historians broadly accept the cultural context of these figures, others can't help but notice the strange recurring forms, large heads, round faces, limbless torsos. Some have compared them to modern depictions of extraterrestrials. You don't need to believe in aliens to see the similarity, but it does spark a curiosity. Fringe theorists have long proposed that the Wandjina are ancient depictions of sky visitors. Some go further, pointing to star maps found in other cave systems, to Dreamtime stories that speak of beings descending from the heavens, walking among the people, and shaping the land. Mainstream scholars counter that these stories are spiritual, not literal. That the Wandjina are embodiments of weather law and environment, not astronauts. But either way, what's clear is this: they were important. Important enough to last 40,000 years. Yes, 40,000. Some of the oldest known Aboriginal rock art in Australia, dated through sophisticated dating techniques like optically stimulated luminescence, may be over 50,000 years old. That's before the Ice Age. before the woolly mammoth, before Europe saw its first permanent settlements. And yet, these ancient people weren't just surviving, they were creating, painting, remembering, transmitting knowledge through symbols so enduring they still cling to stone through floods, droughts, fire, and time. You move deeper into the shelter. More figures appear, not just Wangina, but animals, fish, kangaroos, turtles, and even objects, boomerangs, spears, boats. One panel shows a sailing ship with masts painted hundreds of years ago, when the first European vessels were spotted along the coast. It's all here, stacked in time like sediment. And through it all, a quiet assertion: we were here. We watched. We understood. Some of the most stunning pieces belong to what researchers call the X-ray style art that shows not just the animal, but its internal organs, bones, and muscle. As if the artist had both physical and symbolic vision. As if knowledge wasn't just shown, but revealed. Historians still argue about what exactly these paintings meant. Were they stories? Teaching tools? Religious invocations? Maybe all of them. Maybe something else. What's certain is that they weren't idle. They were essential. And not just to the people who painted them, but to the land itself. In Aboriginal cosmology, land isn't just territory, it's being. It holds memory, law, obligation. A rock is not just a rock, it is a relative. A river is not just a water source, it is an ancestor, a narrative, a responsibility. The rock art is part of that system. It isn't owned, but cared for. It doesn't simply depict the dreaming. It is the dreaming made visible. Alive. You step back from the wall now, the sunlight angling through the shelter's opening. The painted faces seem to follow you, not in menace, but in watchfulness. A reminder that this isn't your story. You're just passing through it. And maybe that's what makes this place feel different from all the others you visited. The pyramids, the tunnels, the temples, they were built for the future. For posterity. They reached outward. But this was never meant to be found by outsiders. This was made to endure within. You hike slowly out of the shelter, the landscape opening around you in ripples of red and ochre. Birds circle high above. Somewhere nearby, a river carves its path through sandstone unchanged for millennia. And you realize that the greatest mystery here isn't how long ago these paintings were made or what they show. It's that the culture behind them is still alive. Aboriginal Australians carry these stories, these connections, these obligations to country even today. Most ancient civilizations leave behind ruins. This one leaves behind continuity. And that may be the most impressive monument of all. So, as the light fades and you look back one last time at the faces in the stone, those round eyes, that steady silence, you hear no voice. But you feel something, a presence, not from the stars, from the earth, watching, waiting, still here. You leave the painted caves of Australia behind the weight of 50,000 years of story pressing gently against your back. And now the ground beneath your feet hardens. Your boots crunch over gravel. The air sharpens with the chill of high elevation, and all around you the land rises into low hills, then jagged mountains. You've arrived in the Balkans. In a country most travelers skip past on the map. But here, nestled among the forests of southern Bosnia and Herzegovina, lies one of the most debated and divisive sites in modern archaeology. They call it the Bosnian Pyramid. You stand before a hill, steep, symmetrical, oddly geometric. Locals call it Vysochika. It looks like a natural formation at first glance, covered in soil blanketed with trees. But in 2005, a Bosnian-American researcher named Semir Osmanagic claimed something astonishing, that this wasn't a hill at all, but a massive pyramid, possibly the oldest and largest ever built. Historians still argue fiercely about whether it's a true archaeological site or a misinterpreted geological formation. But the debate itself has stirred up something ancient, something that makes you want to look closer. You climb slowly now. The slope is steep but consistent unnaturally, so some say. Volunteers and amateur researchers have dug into the earth here for years, uncovering what they describe as layers of artificial stone arranged like tiles or blocks fitted together at right angles. Some say it's just fractured conglomerate natural slabs broken by time. Others believe it's megalithic construction hidden beneath millennia of sediment. The layers are too consistent, too clean. They call it the Pyramid of the Sun. And according to Osmanagić's team, it's part of a larger complex, including 4 other pyramidal hills, forming a network of sacred geometry beneath Bosnia's quiet countryside. You reach the summit and look out. The surrounding hills mirror the one you're standing on: sharp ridges, clean angles, unusual symmetry. Too much symmetry, say believers. Too unlikely to be random. They point to mathematical relationships, alignment with the cardinal points, and even astronomical features that seem intentional. But perhaps the strangest feature lies below: a tunnel. Osmanagić's team claims to have discovered a sprawling network of underground passages stretching for miles beneath the so-called pyramid. They call them the Ravne tunnels. And what's inside, if the claims are true, is deeply unsettling. You enter the tunnel now mentally. The temperature drops. The air smells of damp earth and stone. The walls are rough, but in places seem carved, shaped by human hands. There are dry stacked stone walls placed with care and inscriptions found on sandstone blocks marked with strange, almost pictographic symbols. Some say they've discovered ancient stone spheres here, perfect orbs of heavy material placed in chambers as if meant to focus energy. Others speak of faint hums, electromagnetic fields, and measurable spikes in negative ions, suggesting at the very least that this space does something to the body. Fringe theorists go further. They believe the tunnels are part of an energy grid, an ancient power station built by a civilization lost to time. Some claim the structures predate the last ice age, that they were built long before Mesopotamia, before Egypt, before language as we know it. Skeptics, of course, push back. Hard. The European Association of Archaeologists has formally denounced the pyramid claims as pseudoscience. They insist the site is a natural hill and that the tunnels are modern or recent, possibly old mining galleries misinterpreted by well-meaning enthusiasts. And yet, something draws you in. You walk deeper into the Raven tunnels now, flashlight flickering across rough-hewn rock. You pass side chambers with offerings, crystals, incense, coins. You see tourists and researchers moving silently through the dim corridors, not because they're being reverent, but because the atmosphere asks for silence. Then you come to a flat, smooth stone with a curious inscription, a mix of lines and spirals that don't match any known language. No one's been able to translate it. Some think it's a hoax. Others say it's a remnant from an unknown culture, something pre-Indo-European, prehistoric, prehistory even. That's the strange gravity of this place. Even if the claims are exaggerated, even if there is no pyramid, no energy grid, no lost science, the mystery feels real. The experience feels ancient. And maybe that's more important than a certificate of authenticity, because maybe what we're looking for in these places isn't proof. Maybe it's resonance. You rise again into the sunlight back atop Vysoka Hill. The trees sway. The grass flattens beneath the wind. From here, the world looks different, not because it's been explained, but because it's been questioned. And you realize something subtle. Every great archaeological mystery walks a narrow line between fact and faith, between what we can measure and what we feel in our bones. The Bosnian pyramid may not be a pyramid, or it might be something we don't have the vocabulary for yet. Either way, the search has meaning. The tourists who climb this hill, the locals who believe, the researchers who scan stone with radar, the skeptics who ask hard questions, they're all part of the same impulse, the one that's driven every mystery in this journey. What came before us? What did they know? What did they leave behind for us to find? Maybe the real pyramid here isn't made of stone. Maybe it's made of questions stacked on questions rising into a shape we've barely begun to understand. You turn to descend, heartful, mind open. The hill behind you keeps its silence, as it always has. You descend from the Bosnian hills, still unsure whether you walked upon an ancient pyramid or just the world's most persistent question mark. But your journey isn't over. There's one more place that calls a place often overlooked because it hides in plain sight. This time you find yourself beneath the city of Rome. Yes, that Rome. Eternal, marble, imperial. But the story you're about to hear doesn't begin in the Colosseum or the Pantheon. It begins below in tunnels older than empire, carved not for glory, but for silence. Welcome to the Roman catacombs. You walk now down a staircase carved directly into the earth. The stone walls grow colder, closer. The light dims. You pass a simple cross etched in the rock, just a line intersecting another. At first, the passage seems ordinary, but it doesn't end. It branches, and then branches again. And soon, you realize you're in a labyrinth. Stretching beneath the city are hundreds of kilometers of catacombs, subterranean burial networks built between the 2nd and 5th centuries CE. The early Christians, persecuted and marginalized, dug these passages as places to bury their dead, to mourn, and perhaps more importantly, to remember. But this isn't just a graveyard. It's a world. You move through narrow halls lined with niches, each just large enough for a human body. Some are sealed with stone, others left open, the bones long gone, or removed to museums. Names are carved here, Latin, Greek, and sometimes symbols, anchors, doves, fish. Codes of a time when faith had to speak softly. Historians still argue how large the full catacomb system really is. Some estimate over 500 miles of tunnels spread beneath the outskirts of the city. Many have collapsed, been looted, or sealed. But some remain open, preserved not just as tourist sites, but as echoes of a forgotten era of resilience. You turn a corner and enter a chamber. Faint light filters in through a ventilation shaft, illuminating a wall of frescoes. Here, in a room no bigger than a bedroom, are paintings over 700 years old. Christ as the Good Shepherd, a woman with arms outstretched in prayer, a banquet scene with bread and fish. The colors are faded but not gone. One painting shows a figure you don't expect, a young woman standing between two lions. Scholars believe it's an early depiction of the martyr Perpetua, torn apart for her beliefs. But here in this quiet chamber, she looks peaceful, triumphant. You sit for a moment in that stillness. The air is dry. The silence is thick, like velvet. And for a second, you hear it not sound exactly, but presence. The feeling of thousands who came before you, who loved, lost, believed, who lit oil lamps and whispered prayers here beneath the crushing weight of empire. And then, you move deeper. Some tunnels lead to ossuaries, chambers stacked with bones arranged in patterns. Others lead to crypts where popes and saints were buried in secret long before basilicas bore their names. You pass one such crypt, its entrance sealed now, but marked by a Latin inscription, Non omnis moriar. Not all of me shall die. Fringe theorists have their own take on the catacombs, of course. Some believe the tunnels predate Christianity, that early Romans or even Etruscans first carved them for sacred purposes, later adopted by the faithful. Others speak of hidden chambers, never opened, containing scrolls, relics, or forbidden knowledge. A few even whisper about alignments between catacomb entrances and constellations. But even the facts are strange enough. The catacombs weren't legal at first. Christians were often buried here in secret, sometimes under the cover of night. Yet, over time, the tunnels expanded. Architecturally, they evolved into multi-level cities of the dead, with staircases, chapels, and even meeting halls. The deeper levels often required expert engineering to prevent collapse. You enter one such chamber now, once a gathering place for worship. A simple altar stands at the far end. The ceiling is low. The walls bear faint soot marks from long extinguished flames, and on the floor, etched by hand, are small crosses arranged in a grid. This was a place of hope, not horror, not a crypt for decay, but for remembrance. And maybe that's what makes the catacombs so unique. They weren't about fear of death. They were about the refusal to forget, about building a hidden network of memory beneath a world too busy conquering to care. Some believe the very act of carving these tunnels was resistance, a quiet defiance, a way of saying, "We matter, we endure, even beneath your feet." Eventually, the persecutions ended. Christianity was legalized. Churches were built above the catacombs. But many early martyrs remained underground, their bones cradled by the rock that once protected them. You return to the surface slowly, now each step feeling heavier than the last. The sun stings your eyes. Rome is loud again, cars, scooters, voices. But you carry something with you. Not sorrow, not fear. Something simpler. Stillness. Because beneath the noise of history lies a truth so easy to miss that even the smallest, quietest acts, like carving a prayer into stone or painting a shepherd on a cave wall, can last longer than empires. And when the noise fades, those stories remain. Rome disappears behind you, slipping into the mist of memory. You've walked its tunnels, touched its silence. But now the air feels different, cooler, thinner. You find yourself ascending again, not into the clouds exactly, but to a place that seems almost above the world. You are standing in the Andes, nearly 8,000 feet above sea level. Below you, steep green terraces cascade down a mountainside. The Urubamba River coils like a silver thread far below. And ahead of you in the morning light are stone walls so precise they seem grown rather than built. Welcome to Machu Picchu. Not a lost city exactly, but one that kept its secrets longer than most. Hidden from Spanish conquistadors, forgotten by history, and then rediscovered by the outside world in 1911 when Hiram Bingham followed the trail of rumors and reached this mountain ridge only to find a city in the clouds. You walk slowly through its gates now, past rows of granite buildings, temples, fountains, and terraces. Llamas graze lazily in the grass, indifferent to your presence. But the city still watches. Historians still argue what Machu Picchu really was. A royal estate, a sacred retreat, an observatory. All of the above. What we know is this. It was built by the Inca in the 15th century, likely under the reign of Pachacuti, and it was abandoned about 100 years later, possibly during the Spanish conquest, though the Spanish never found it. What's strange is how intact it is. Unlike so many ancient sites, Machu Picchu wasn't looted, burned, or toppled. It simply waited. Its stones remained, its stairways unbroken, its fountains still capable of channeling water, as if it knew we'd come looking again. You walk through the Temple of the Sun, its rounded wall fitted with such precision that not even a knife blade slips between the stones. The temple aligns with the solstice. When the sun rises on a specific day in June, its light shines directly through the temple's window, illuminating a ceremonial stone. The builders weren't guessing. They were measuring the heavens. Then there's the Intihuatana, stone sometimes called the hitching post of the sun. Carved from a single piece of granite, it may have been used to track the sun's movement throughout the year. Or perhaps it was symbolic, spiritual, a way of tethering cosmic order to the land. You rest your hand on it, now smooth, cold, and strangely warm beneath your fingertips. The air around it feels different, lighter, more alert. Fringe theorists have long speculated that Machu Picchu wasn't just a city, but a power center, a node in a network of energy lines crisscrossing the planet. They point to the site's geometry, its relationship to nearby peaks, and the overall harmony of its layout. Some say it was built to amplify natural energy. Others believe it was a portal, a place where the veil between worlds thinned. Mainstream archaeologists roll their eyes at such theories, but even they admit Machu Picchu was built with a kind of reverence. Every stone placement seems thoughtful. Every stairway leads somewhere purposeful. The city feels alive. You wander through the residential quarters, now modest homes, some with still visible hearths. You see the remnants of workshops, food storage buildings, and communal areas. It wasn't just a ceremonial site. People lived here, laughed, worked, slept under these same stars, and yet no one knows why they left. There's no sign of battle, no evidence of disease or disaster, just absence. As if the city exhaled and vanished. Was it intentional? A retreat ahead of conquest? A migration? Or something else? You reach the edge of the city now and gaze out at the surrounding peaks. Huayna Picchu rises behind you like a watchful guardian. The clouds slide low through the valleys. Condors drift in silence. You realize that Machu Picchu isn't just a city, it's a place designed to make you feel small. Not diminished, but humbled. Every path invites reflection. Every wall even now seems to whisper that you are a guest. That the mountain was here long before you, and will be long after. The Inca didn't just build with stone. They built with respect for the terrain, the sky, the seasons. Their structures mirror the contours of the landscape. Their windows frame specific stars. Their terraces follow the shape of the hills, preserving soil, conserving water, and feeding a city perched at the edge of the world. And here's the strange part. Despite all our modern tools, we still don't fully understand how they did it. Some of the stones used in Machu Picchu's walls weigh up to 50 tons. They were quarried nearby, yes, but moving and fitting them with such precision without mortar, without wheels, without steel, is something we've yet to replicate with ease. The Inca left no written records explaining their methods, no blueprints, no architectural manuals, just the stones themselves, telling the story in silence. You sit now on a ledge overlooking the city, the wind wrapping gently around you. Below, the stone paths glisten from the morning dew. A single bird sings. And you feel it, that same pulse that's been with you throughout this journey. Not from the stones, from the people who placed them. Because in the end, Machu Picchu, like every site you visited, is not about the ruins. It's about the builders. The ones who dared to imagine something eternal, who carved meaning into matter, who disappeared but somehow didn't. You take one last breath of the mountain air. The city rests still poised between heaven and earth. And you've seen it now, another piece of the mystery. You leave the sacred ridgelines of Machu Picchu behind, the stones still echoing with the quiet conviction of hands that shaped a mountain. But now you turn toward the sea, not the Pacific nor the Atlantic, but one far more ancient. You sail back across continents and epochs toward a desert that once flourished with lakes, rivers, and cities, now buried beneath silence. You arrive in Egypt, but not in Cairo, not at Giza. You're heading west into the Sahara, into the dunes. Because somewhere beneath this sea of sand, cartographers and explorers have whispered for centuries, lies something deeply strange, a map. But not just any map, a hidden one. One carved perhaps into the very foundations of the continent. Welcome to the story of the Saharan map. Beneath the sand, a mystery so vast and elusive, it may not be a single object at all, but a mosaic of clues scattered across the world's largest desert. It begins with an enigma. How did ancient peoples navigate this unforgiving landscape? You stand now beneath the blistering sun sand, stretching in every direction, thinking back to when this desert wasn't dry. Thousands of years ago, the Sahara was green, a sprawling savanna filled with rivers, lakes, and forests. Evidence of this green Sahara has been emerging over the last century. Fossilized fish in the middle of the desert, cave paintings of hippos and swimming humans, and deep radar scans showing long-buried river systems winding across the sand. And among those discoveries, something curious. In several locations across the desert, Unusual geometric patterns have been found: perfect circles, grid-like formations, and repeating motifs etched into the stone or appearing beneath the surface through satellite imaging. Some are natural, yes, but others seem too precise, too consistent, like someone was trying to draw something. You crouch now beside one such pattern, faint concentric rings barely visible in the sand, uncovered only by wind and luck. Satellite maps have revealed more of them: circles and spirals, dozens, even hundreds of meters wide. Some researchers call them geoglyphs. Others think they're the remnants of long-forgotten settlements or ceremonial spaces. A few go further: they believe these patterns are the map. Historians still argue what exactly they represent. Are they astronomical calendars, star charts, migratory maps, or messages from cultures that knew the desert long before it became one? One of the most debated examples is the Rishat structure, also known as the Eye of the Sahara. Viewed from space, it looks like a giant bullseye, an immense geological formation roughly 25 miles wide, composed of concentric rings of rock. Mainstream geology says it's a natural dome formed by erosion over millions of years. But fringe theorists, they see something else. Some claim the Rishat structure was the original Atlantis, a city of rings described by Plato, now collapsed into stone. Others suggest it was a landmark used by prehistoric navigators, a compass rose carved into the earth itself. There are even tales of ancient texts long lost or suppressed that mention a great city near the eye swallowed by shifting sands. You walk the ridges of the Rishat structure. In your mind, the wind carving your thoughts down to their simplest shapes. From above, it's unmistakably symmetrical. But from the ground, it feels more like a crater, a wound, or a gateway. And then there's the matter of the ancient maps. Several Renaissance-era cartographers drew peculiar outlines of North Africa shapes that seem to depict river systems and lakes that no longer exist. Some maps show massive inland seas in places that are now bone dry. Others hint at mountain ranges and coastlines long erased. Were these cartographers guessing, copying older, even ancient sources? Or did they know something we don't? One 16th century map by Orontius Phineas shows what appears to be Antarctica, centuries before it was officially discovered. But not frozen, not covered in ice, as if someone had mapped it in a different age. Could something similar have happened with the Sahara? Could a prehistoric map have been passed down, carried by oral traditions, lost manuscripts, or artifacts now buried under miles of sand? You sift through the sand now, imagining what might lie beneath fragments of stone tablets, fossilized reeds bearing carvings, or murals showing the desert as it once was, alive, navigable, and full of purpose. Some researchers suggest that desert tribes like the Tuareg may carry pieces of that map in their songs, their roots, their sacred places, that their knowledge of water sources, stone markers, and celestial navigation forms a kind of living cartography passed not on paper, but in memory. And maybe that's the key. Maybe the map beneath the Sahara isn't a literal thing, but a tapestry woven from ancient memory stone alignments, oral traditions, and ruins we haven't found yet. Maybe it's not under the sand, but within it, etched in behavior, belief, and buried logic. You stand atop a dune now, letting the wind speak in long vowels. The sand moves with time, not against it. It hides and reveals in cycles. And somewhere beneath your feet, perhaps a line once drawn by a hand, 10,000 years ago, still sleeps, waiting for just the right gust of wind. Fringe thinkers will continue to speculate. Archaeologists will continue to scan. The desert will continue to whisper. But for now, you stand in the middle of an invisible map, a place where rivers no longer flow, but their memory shapes the land, where cities may have risen and fallen, leaving only geometry as their ghost. And you realize sometimes the mystery isn't what we see. It's what we almost see, what flickers just beyond understanding, and what might yet rise again if the wind blows right. Hey guys, tonight we've wandered far. From jungle temples and underground cities to bones in bogs and pyramids beneath sand, you've followed every step. Not just across landscapes, but through questions, through centuries, through the soft breath of mystery itself. You're standing now at the edge of it all. No more maps, no more tunnels, no more speculation or dust-covered stones. Just this moment. Just you listening after everything. The stories still echo around you, gentle lingering. But they've slowed. And so should you. So before we continue, take a moment to breathe. In through the nose. Out through the past. Maybe you're lying in bed now, light-off fan humming blanket pulled over your shoulder just right. Or maybe you're watching the clock blink at 2:17 a.m., wondering if sleep will ever come. If so, you're not alone. That's why we're here after all. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. And now let's let the stories settle. Because the strange thing about archaeological mysteries, the truly strange thing is that the further you dig, the more you find yourself. All those cities we talked about, they weren't just made of stone. They were made of belief, of attention, of people caring enough to place one rock on top of another and say, this matters, this stays. And that's the part that lingers long after the theories fade. We may never know who built Nan Madol, or what secrets still lie buried under Teotihuacan, or why the Sumerians believed their kings ruled for thousands of years. We may never unlock the full meaning of the bog bodies, or the lines in Nazca, or the tunnels beneath Bosnia. But maybe that's okay. Maybe the mystery is the gift, because it keeps us soft, curious, willing to wonder. It reminds us that not everything needs solving, that some questions are meant to be lived with, held gently, tucked beside you like an old book you never quite finish. The ancients didn't leave instruction manuals. They left arrangements, alignments, odd decisions carved in rock that don't make sense, unless you believe in meaning. And maybe they were trying to say what every human tries to say: we were here. We dreamed. We reached for something. And isn't that what you're doing now? Reaching for rest, for quiet, for a world where not everything needs your immediate answer. So let this story be a stepping stone into that kind of night. You've wandered the lost cities. You've listened to bones. You've stood where stars once guided builders, and where time tried to erase them. You've touched stone that remembered hands older than writing. Now it's your turn to rest. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Let the stone circles fade. Let the jungle hush its song. Let the desert go back to sleep, and let the wind smooth over the footprints we made. You're safe here. You're still, and you don't have to know everything. You just have to breathe. Close your eyes if they aren't already. Let your jaw unclench. Let your hands relax. And as you drift further down, deeper than any catacomb or hidden chamber, know that the stories you heard tonight will wait for you. Quietly, patiently, like all the best mysteries. Sleep well, traveler. The past will still be here when you wake.